Hi, I'm Ben.
And I'm Josh.
And this is the Bad at Magic podcast, a podcast about games, life, and other things. And welcome to episode 42.
Ben, there are so many listeners, I'm sure, have been waiting for this episode. And do you know why?
Why?
Because, Ben, 42 is the answer.
The answer to what?
All right, are you just playing dumb to make the podcast go as to have back and forth rapport, or do you really not know the significance of 42 in nerd culture?
The answer to the life, the universe, and everything?
Yes, thank you. I appreciate that. Yes, if you have not heard, 42 is the answer to life, universe, and everything. There was a book, Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. I'm blanking on the author.
Scott Adams.
Scott Adams, thank you. In where, I'm going to spoil a part of it, there's an alien race, and they created the most powerful supercomputer known to any conscious entity in the galaxy. And they asked
Scott, I think it's Douglas. Now I got to look.
It's Douglas Adams, thank you. And they asked the supercomputer that they named Deep Thought, we want to know the ultimate answer. What do you mean? The answer to life, universe, and everything. Okay, I can figure that out, but it's going to take me 7.5 million years. And then the descendants of the programmers came back 7.5 million years later, and they asked, okay, what is the answer, Deep Thought? And Deep Thought's response was, you're not going to like it.
Yeah.
And when they finally got the answer out of the computer, the computer said, the answer to your question is 42. And then it goes on this whole rant about, well, what is really the question? But none of that matters. All nerds everywhere know that the answer is 42. And why that is so particularly important to this episode of the podcast, Ben, is because I think personally that this episode encompasses the answers to all of the questions that you could have about yourself, about your existence in this universe, about society, culture, religion, biology, natural selection. All of it is contained in this episode of the podcast.
Nice. That is outstanding. Usually I'm the one setting the bar that high. So everyone that's listening, episode 42 is about life, the universe, and everything. Here in this podcast about life, games, and other things.
I don't care what you're doing, people. You need to stop, sit down, pour yourself a drink, and really enjoy this one.
All right. Well, before we get into all that highfalutin stuff from last time, there's a couple of things I wanted to follow up on. Now, I brought up something. I brought a knife to a gunfight, apparently, when I challenged you on a question that had come up in WandaVision, and that is gum food? And your answer was...
Resoundingly no. Gum is not food.
All right. So I realized I just failed last time to appropriately resist your initial shot. What makes something food?
I said this at the time.
Yeah, go ahead.
If you are going to die of malnutrition, you need something that can sustain your existence, and gum is not it.
Okay, but do we only eat things that can sustain our existence?
That's not what we're talking about. Now you're trying to argue the semantics of food.
Yeah. It does gum meet the characterization of what we consider to be food? I think it does.
It is not ever ingested. It is only masticated and then discarded.
We do that with some things we consider to be food.
What things do we chew and then spit out that we consider food? I challenge you on this. Don't do straw man me. Prove it. Screenshot or it didn't happen.
All right. I mean, we only consume part of it. It contains less mass after it comes out of our mouth. Like, say, corn on the cob.
We only eat a part of that. Every part of the corn on the cob that goes into your mouth, you swallow and then try to process for nourishment. Yes, I understand. We don't get a lot of nourishment out of corn, and there's a lot of byproduct that flows right through us. But you, sir, can sustain your existence on nothing but corn.
All right, I'm letting you set up too many of the rules in this debate. Food are things that you put in your mouth because it has pleasing fragrance. It tastes good. It gives it something to chew on. It gives you the sensation of swallowing. Gum does all of those things.
You swallow your gum?
It stimulates the production of saliva. It's also
you just changed. You just laid out the rules for what is food, and you're already having to backpedal on one of them.
No, I'm not backpedaling.
You don't swallow gum, Ben.
You don't swallow the cob of the corn, but you still put it in your mouth.
I don't. All I have is now a vision in my head of Ben Rich shoving an entire corn on the cob into his mouth and then pulling it out clean of all the kernels. Like, I don't put the cob into my mouth when I'm eating corn on the cob.
When the gum enters your mouth and when you spit it out, it has less mass than when it went in. Yes or no?
I would argue that it takes up less space. It has less volume. I would say it has the same mass.
The same mass. Are you sure about that?
Fine. There's sugars and stuff that come off of it, but not in a quantity that I think would sustain you at the way that food does.
It's not about sustenance. Not all food is sustenance. If we're to use your definition, then if you were to take any one individual food and only eat that, would it sustain you? I'd say most things that you would consider to be food don't meet that definition.
For the fact that you can't get, yes, just like if you were a pure vegan, you would die of not having enough protein, et cetera,
right.
et cetera. And vegans, don't at me. I don't care what you think. But here is my challenge to you, and you still haven't addressed it. Like, is there any other food with air quotes that you put in your mouth, chew for the pleasure of chewing, and then get rid of it?
Tobacco.
I knew you were going to go with tobacco. That has way more byproducts than food. And anybody that has ever chewed and tried to swallow the chewing tobacco will tell you that is not a good idea.
There's just one that comes to mind. I'm not good at coming up with examples off the top of my head.
That's exactly what I'm talking about. This is like one of the only things in the entire realm of edible products where it is strictly for chewing and then discarding.
Yeah.
That doesn't make it food.
I think if you're to argue philosophically of what constitutes something, if you have a list of all the attributes that make it fit inside of that realm, gum has most of them.
But not
like
all
I said, it smells, it tastes, it goes in your mouth, you chew it. It's all of those things.
Okay, so if it meets a certain number of your criteria, but not all of them, it can still be considered food?
Sure.
Okay, sawdust. I can
That's
chew
a great
sawdust.
Example. That's a great example of one, and I consume sawdust daily.
Okay, explain yourself because.
So if you hang on, I don't normally do this, and if you want to stall for a sec, I'm gonna go get.
Is it a Cliff Bar? Are you gonna show me a Cliff Bar?
Yeah, a Cliff Bar, a bottle of Slim Fast. So a bottle of Slim Fast, in the ingredients list, it contains food grade cellulose gel and gum. It's literal sawdust. So
that's that meme you see on the internet every once in a while. The kid at the science fair. How much sawdust can you put in a Rice Krispie treat before people notice?
So I love that you pulled that example out. Is sawdust food? Apparently so.
I think we could debate this literally for the remainder of this episode, but that would not meet the criteria of the bar that I set.
That's good, though. I felt like I didn't really give it a good shot last time. This time I did. So I feel much better.
I still venomously disagree with you, and I think it's ridiculous that you could take this stance. That's
the great point, though. Sometimes disagreeing just for the sake of disagreeing is actually kind of enjoyable, and I enjoyed it. So,
all right. Well, I'm glad we talked about the gum instead of the hot dog thing because
We'll save that one.
Yeah, I was going to throw my monitor into the street when you started trying to explain to me that a hot dog's not a sandwich.
I'm sending you that photo of someone that cuts a bagel longitudinally and puts peanut butter and jelly in between the half moon sections.
Yeah, still a sandwich.
Okay. So another thing we failed to do last time when we reviewed WandaVision is we failed to give it our Bad at Magic style review of the magic system. So was the magic in WandaVision hard or soft magic?
Ultra soft. Like, it's ridiculously soft. Like, the rule of thumb is if in the system itself they call it magic, it's probably soft because that just immediately puts in your brain that there's not really any set, clear, defined rules for this.
Now, it's interesting that you'd say that because when Agatha does her big reveal and she's telling Wanda about her prophetic destiny, it's starting to sound like there are rules. And Wanda's like, oh, really? I wondered about this. And at the end, they kind of hint at the fact that Wanda can get better at her magic by understanding the rules.
Yes, but she was already bending reality to a degree that was literally unheard of by a professional witch for 400 years without knowing any of the rules. And, of course, while other witches have rules, our protagonist has no rules, and she does whatever she wants. So,
yes, and this was a good example of using a soft magic system in a way that facilitates storytelling instead of hampering it. You know, the fact that we didn't know what the where the magic was coming from or how it was working was intriguing and interesting and propelled us through the story instead of just being baffling and frustrating.
Yes, it was half of the plot, with the other half being Wanda trying to reconcile her grief. I agree with you there.
Yeah. So Sanderson's 3 laws, did the magic system, did they help us understand the rules and limitations of the magic system? Did they use those rules and limitations to tell the story without introducing new things?
The rules were not well defined to us, because I don't think the rules are well defined. The one time that they went out of their way to explain some of the rules was Agatha explaining how she was going to be beaten in the 3rd act with the runes on the wall.
There were times where they did the rules. I mean, like, the people on the outside are like, that's the hex. We can't go in because if we go in, we lose control and we don't know if we'll be able to get back out.
See, that was more of the rules of, like, the scenario. But if we are looking at Wanda's powers, there are no rules.
I don't know. I mean, we saw the limitations of it. Like when you went to the edge of town, it was like she didn't have enough power to keep everybody living their imaginary lives.
Agatha, our antagonist, literally said, "You have unbounded chaos power. No one knows what you are capable of."
I don't think that means she did.
Well, they're kind of setting it up that way. You're the guy talking about the big prophecy. She's going to rip apart the entire planet Earth with her magic powers.
Destroy the world. Just like in Thor Ragnarok. That's what I think of, the fulfillment of that prophecy.
So powers on a scale that are undefined enough and murky enough to destroy a world, that's pretty soft in my opinion. And that, I think, does not adhere to any rules of the magic system.
Yeah. All right. So soft magic, and it does adhere to the laws. I mean, that was ultimately the payoff. That they set up the system, they showed us like the thing with the runes, and then Wanda used them against Agatha, defeated the bad guy, and everything kind of came to a satisfactory conclusion, including Wanda having to make the sacrifice in order to save the people of the town once she realized what she'd been doing to them.
All right, and so Sanderson's laws are specifically aimed at, this is how you use a magic system to help facilitate telling a story and not supplanting the story.
Yes.
In this case, they succeeded except for one point, and that is the introduction of the runes in the 3rd act. That
you thought that was cheating?
I felt it was a little bit immersion wrecking for me, because
it's like, hey, welcome to real witchcraft, Wanda.
Which is fine and dandy, except that was the one thing that Agatha went out of her way to explain to her. Like, okay,
I get it. It is a very contrived movie cliche to like have her show her the thing and then she uses it against her. I got that.
I still agree that it was a perfectly valid way to reconcile the conflict at the end of that show. I feel like that was very introducing something new before building on what you have in order to, how are we going to tie this up in a bow and get rid of the bad guy at the end?
Yeah, I got it. But I think by that same token, they also very much constrained themselves to the rules that they'd set up, in that Wanda ultimately couldn't just choose to have everything. She couldn't release the people of the town and not give up Vision and her children. She had to choose between them.
I'll agree with that. I'm actually going to take a left turn on you here. One thing I think that does adhere to all of Sanderson's laws and is a hard magic system is Vision's powers. We are well aware of Vision's capacity and his capabilities, and they did not expound, elaborate, or change or add anything new, and yet they were still able to reconcile his antagonist plot, like his actual fight with White Vision, in a way that was extremely satisfying, without introducing the 3rd act Deus Ex Machina runes mechanic.
Okay. And also last time we both came across, when we talked about the origin there of Monica Rambeau going through the hex multiple times and having altered the cells in her body to the point where she got some kind of vague abilities and stuff. And we didn't know if Monica Rambeau was an actual Marvel Comics hero. Monica Rambeau is an actual Marvel Comics hero. I looked it up. She's not a major character. She hasn't got like her own comic book series, but she is a lesser character that has powers and is a known character in the Marvel Universe.
Outstanding. Just there's so many people in the Marvel Universe who could possibly keep track of them.
I found this excellent infographic by Pop Chart Lab that actually put like every comic book hero ever on a taxonomy. I'll put it up on the Facebook. This week.
You have a soft spot in your heart for well-made infographics. So.
Oh, and this is a well-made infographic. It basically gives the taxonomy of all superheroes' powers by what kind of powers they are. Like, are they animal powers? Are they weapon powers? Are they superhuman powers? Are they supernatural powers? And then each among those divided into, like, what kind of animal is it? What kind of weapon is it? What, yeah. Really cool.
That does sound cool. I will look at that.
Yeah. It is time for Bad at Logic, and that is our critical thinking cards that you can find on yourlogicalfallacyis.com. Last week we talked about a logical fallacy. The deck is half logical fallacies and half biases. So this week, Josh, let's talk about a bias.
So first, before we dive into it, logical fallacies, for those of you who may not be aware, are problems with the way you think. When you're drawing a conclusion, going from point A to point B, and you think that you have a clear path there, but you've broken some kind of rule where it's inconsistent, or like those two don't line up the way that you think you do.
Non sequitur. It does not follow.
Yes. Biases are different in that they are internal to you. They're not external ideas that you think about. They are the way that you perceive the world and the way you process information. So biases are a lot more insidious than logical fallacies because they are notoriously difficult to spot in yourself.
Yeah, false assumptions.
You can point them out in other people. That's no problem. This one especially, like we can, I'm sure you and I could point at each other all day and like draw all these illustrations. But today specifically, we're going to talk about the bias, the backfire effect. And to quote the card, it's when your core beliefs are challenged, it can cause you to believe even more strongly. So if you've ever been in an argument or somebody proposes an alternate viewpoint and you find yourself rallying around your current idea and evangelicalizing it, or just like championing it stronger than you probably might even feel for it, you're falling victim to the backfire effect.
Yeah, it's really problematic for a lot of people, even scientists.
Well, everybody. And this is because it's a bias and not a fallacy.
I was listening to the Freakonomics podcast this week, and they had a guest on, and this was the thing. The guest was talking about people's ability to change their habits. Specifically, they were looking at the idea of like New Year's resolutions. And the suggestion was, the idea is that people make New Year's resolutions, but they don't keep them. And so she was actually conducting experiments and doing actual research to try to figure out if that's true or not. But the problem she was having is that everyone that had done research on it kind of began with a preconceived assumption, and nobody's research was, they were rejecting evidence that disproved their assumptions. And so there wasn't good research on it. So she was kind of having to do her own.
Okay. That's not really the backfire effect, but I get what you're saying.
Well, but the point I'm talking about is the people that were conducting these bad experiments didn't realize they were conducting bad experiments because
in the face of counter arguments, they were solidifying their own personal beliefs.
Yes, exactly.
Okay. I can name one minor anecdote where this happened to me, and I've identified it myself.
Uh-huh.
So as part of my master's degree, I had to take a business ethics course, which was excruciatingly painful. And one of the exercises was, they gave us this situation. There is a restaurant that they are stocking all of their stuff for the first time, and they bought name brand ketchup. Pick your favorite ketchup, Heinz, Hunt's, whatever your favorite ketchup is. They bought name brand ketchup bottles and put all those bottles on all the tables. But then, months later, when all those ketchup bottles ran out, they went to Costco. They bought a 50-gallon drum of, Kroger brand or generic garbage ketchup.
Kirkland signature ketchup.
There you go. And then refilled all of the name brand bottles. And the question was, is that a moral, is that morally acceptable? Is this wrong in a moral sense? And then
Is it unethical?
Is it unethical? And so my response, it started with this sentence. This entire situation falls well into the realm of who cares? But for the sake of this course, this is the stance that I'm going to take. And I took the stance that who cares? Like, it's ketchup. Nobody is coming to nobody's going to change their decision making based on the brand of ketchup that is on the table at the restaurant. I thought that was well below the threshold of people debating it. But Here's the thing. I took a very weak stance because who cares? But then somebody responded to my post challenging my position like, well, no, this is critically important. And how dare you think these things? And then I found myself really rallying behind and like digging the trench on the top of my hill of, no, this is stupid. And I was going to get into a full-blown internet argument with this guy before I realized what I was doing.
Well, because you were arguing from a utilitarian point of view and they were arguing from a deontological point of view. From a pure moral perspective, is what you're doing deceptive from the point of view of believing that there is absolute truth? Are you telling a lie by doing that? And the answer is yes, therefore what you're doing is wrong. Yours was more utilitarian, which is, what is the harm being done? What's the utility of this? Does it rise above the threshold where this would cause harm to people? Yes. No, it does not. Therefore, this is ethical. So based on the assumptions both of you started with, it was unethical from their point of view and ethical from your point of view, and you were both right.
You see, that's ridiculous. I hate it when you get these situations where both people are right, arguing opposite sides of a point.
Yeah. Well, the backfire effect is just to double down and then start rejecting, information that would disprove your assumptions.
Well, there you go. And this is the problem, because if you don't identify this happening in yourself, you find yourself in a position where you are rejecting completely valid, completely logical responses, even like clear proven data from external sources. You are denying all of it simply because you're trying to continue to be what you think is right, which goes back to what I said before that C.G.P. Gray said, if you want to always be right, you have to always be willing to change your mind.
Yeah, well, that was big of you to pick an example of where it was you doing it. I'll give one of someone else. Like you said, it's easier to identify it there. I found online when I have friends, particularly on Facebook, that like to post memes or repost photo macros that are supposedly giving the fallacies of their opposing political point of view or promoting the virtues of their preferred political point of view. I can look at those and almost instantaneously be like, oh, that's not even true. That's, false logic or a bad conclusion or bad data. It probably just came from some Russian IRA internet troll forum, whatever. And I'll think I'm doing them a favor by fact-checking their post. I think that they'd be more interested in truth than they would in being right. And so I'll try to politely say, hey, there's some unfactual information in this post that you made here. Thought you might want to know so you can take it down. And almost without exception, these people will double down. I don't care whether it's true or not. It's what I believe.
Which is
the backfire effect.
Yeah, that statement that you just said is going to lead to the downfall of humanity someday.
Oh, geez. It's so frustrating. I've had to just stop doing it because I'm like, so people don't care about truth anymore?
All right, and before everybody gets up in arms about our specific political beliefs, let's just make it clear. Both sides are guilty of this. Pick a subject.
I didn't say which side I was talking about.
I know, but people can probably derive from things we've said in the past what our political leanings and stances are. But I want to make it absolutely clear that there are times when the opinions that I believe in are also presented in ways that are completely not factual. Like, yes, I like this meme, but this is just a meme, and we shouldn't be putting out the message this way.
Yeah, you're right. But you know what? I do think that I'm aware. Being aware of the backfire effect can help you combat it. I have maybe like 3 or 4 times I've actually fallen victim to this. One will come along, it pushes the right buttons for me. I'll repost it. Somebody will fact check me, and instead of rejecting the fact checking, I'll check it out and be like, oh man, they're right. This is it, and I'll either post a retraction or I'll take it down.
Well, that's because you're the type of person we shall aspire to be, Ben. While I'm digging the trench to die on my hill, you're the one that's looking at new information and growing as a person.
You do that too. I just care about being factually accurate more than I care about representing what I think is right.
You must have picked up.
I'm not willing to.
You picked up a meme somewhere that being right is good. Yeah. Spoilers for later.
Now that we've had enough of being right, let's talk about being wrong. Josh, give us some bad at husbanding.
Okay, so first of all, this is not wrong. I want to make this clear. I'm not wrong in this scenario. This is only called bad at husbanding. I'm not bad all the time. This is just a scenario that exists in the realm of husbanding, and everything on our podcast is us being bad at things, so it has to fall into that category.
Okay.
All right, Ben. So I love my computer setup. I think I've talked about it on the podcast before.
You have, yeah. Not only have you talked about it on the podcast, but you have a well-reviewed video on YouTube of you building your computer.
Well, I should do another video of all the things that I did.
You never stop. Yeah. Can I list?
Please, go ahead.
Okay. So you had just used the same old dusty old computer for the longest time, and you're finally like, you know what? I'm going to build a new computer. So you meticulously planned it out, bought all the parts, the case, the power supply, the motherboard, the memory, the everything, got it all together, made a video of you assembling this and creating it. And then, of course, it did what it always does when you do that kind of thing. You're like, well, now everything else sucks too, and I got to upgrade all of that. So you got a new monitor, you mounted it, you built a new desk, you cut a hole in the wall to make a place for your computer to live, you routed all the cables, you got a new keyboard, you got a new mouse, you got a widescreen display, all those things, and now you just have like the ultimate pimped out computer setup.
Not ultimate, and all right, so Tony Stark said this in a comic that I love.
You're right, it's not maxed out in all its stats, it's still pretty awesome.
Art is never finished, only abandoned. So every once in a while, I'll think of like one little thing that like, oh, you know what would be great? I could do this little upgrade, or I got this little accessory over here, and like incrementally, everything just continues to progress and get better and better.
I forgot
over time.
the chair.
Oh yes, I got a brand new chair. Oh Ben, it's so now. All right, so I have like $100. One of those.
You're right. We need an update. So at least a photo, if not.
Yeah, I have at my office at work. Our boss bought us new chairs, and it's like the $100 Office Depot special. And the first time I sat, I'm like, wow, this is a really quality chair. And then when we started teleworking from home, I was sitting in a really, really bad chair for a couple of months. It was starting to hurt my back. And I actually went online and took the time to do research. And I spent way more money on a chair than I've ever spent in my entire life. I spent $400 on a chair. And I'll tell you what, Ben, like that chair is just, it's lovely. And it hugs you when you sit down, and it's great. We're getting way off track.
Wait. Before you get back on track, How many hours of research did you spend on a chair?
Probably up to 12. I would say no more than 12. If you were to ask me just objectively and say, Ben, how many hours of research could you do on a chair before you would be completely sick of it and stop no matter what you learned? I'd be like 1 max. Well, I will make a decision after 1 hour of research without making any further research. This is why I love my computer setup so much. It's almost becoming a little hobby of itself, where I can pick one aspect of the setup and then do deep dive research and really get smart on it, and then find the thing I want, and then shop around for it, wait for it to go on sale, etc.
But this is a microcosm of a friction point in our relationship that you're starting to understand. I'll tell you I built a cube, and you'll say, send me a list. I'm like, Josh, that's 360 cards. I'm not typing them out. I'll say, I'm thinking about getting a computer, and you say, here's a website where you can put in every part and see if they're compatible. I'm like, I don't want to spend that much time on it. And so Magic decks and computer setups and all these things, and it's always this friction where you want to really get in and analyze it and spend a lot of time on it. I'm like, yeah, that was enough.
You just squirrel and you're off to the next adventure.
Yeah.
Like I really want. Yeah. You're right. This is the difference between us. Is the things that I get into, I really get into, and then like you show up and like, oh, that was fun, and then you move on to the next thing.
Yeah.
All right. Anyway, this entire conversation stems from the mouse. So I had a vertical mouse that I was using for a long time, but it was like
you showed it to me where like you do it with the side of your hand instead of the palm of your hand.
Yes. So everybody that's thinking right now, put your hand out with your palm facing down, and that's how you would rest your hand on a normal mouse. Now turn your hand 90 degrees so your thumb is facing upwards. That is how you grip a vertical mouse. If you still don't know what I'm talking about, go Google it. It's supposed to be better for wrist pronation and ulnar deviation.
So you tried it. You gave it a shot.
I liked it. Honestly, it was a nice little mouse. The problem is I dropped it. And then it ceased functioning. Like it would work for 1 second and then it would not work for 1 second. And it kept going on and off like that for a long time.
This is an interesting test of the efficacy of a gadget. You get a new gadget that's a little different than when you had, and then it breaks. Would you buy another one of the same or go back to what you had before?
Here's the thing, Ben. I fully intended to buy another vertical mouse, and this time to spend more money on it. I had bought an Amazon Basics one, which is why it broke when I dropped it, because it cost like $15. But they have Logitech makes one for like $150 that is super hardcore and got all the great components and blah blah blah. But here's the thing. In the meantime, I needed to have a working mouse to do my job. And so I went rummaging around through all of our old computer parts because I have them just scattered and lying everywhere. And I found my old Razer gaming mouse from years and years and years ago. And I've since found out that it's first manufactured in 2006.
Okay, Razer is one of those brands that kind of caters to boutique high-end gamers.
And I have a Razer.
You bought this before you had children.
Yes, I bought this before I had children. I bought it at the same time that I bought my Razer mechanical keyboard that I still use that has the super clicky keys that I love to death.
Yeah.
And here's the thing. I plugged in that mouse, that high-quality, like expensive gaming mouse from forever ago. And I put my hand on it and I was using it for one day. I'm like, wow, this is really nice. And it really was. It's just...
Okay, I need you to expound on what you mean by nice.
Okay, so it moves very, very well. The tracking is excellent. It doesn't matter what kind of surface I'm using the mouse on. The cursor is always going to go where I want it to go. It's large. I have big hands, and it is a larger mouse that is contoured very well to my fingers. There are different kinds of grips that people use for mice. People might not know this. If you rest your entire palm on top of the mouse and then click with your fingers, that is one type of grip. I don't do that. I actually grip the mouse with my thumb and my pinky on either side and move the mouse around that way. Those are the only things that really touch the mouse when I'm moving it around.
I had to try it to figure out which one I do.
Which one do you do?
I have a mouse pad in front of me with the raised palm thing, so I anchor my palm on the mouse pad and move it with my thumb and my pinky.
Okay, yeah, that's the claw grip where you're grabbing the mouse and moving it around. You're not resting your hand on it.
Yeah,
that's what I do. But this mouse was very satisfying in its shape and ergonomics, and then the switches, the clicking worked very well. There was no phantom clicks or extra clicking. The scroll wheel was nice. Just all of these little things that you don't think about until you've used a crappy mouse for a while, and then you go back to using a really nice one.
Okay, but this thing's 16 years old. But
so thank you for leading me to my next point. I started looking around. I'm like, you know what? If I'm going to get a mouse, because if I'm going to get another mouse, like I should get one that works well. And then lo and behold, I found out just a couple of months ago, Razer took that exact same shape of mouse. They updated the materials that it was built with. They updated like the guts and the mechanics and the things that are inside of it, and they made it wireless. And it's the same name, but it's the version 2 Pro Wireless or whatever.
Okay.
And
I don't know, man. I have a hard time getting on board with wireless peripherals because
Well, this one's got both Bluetooth and the dongle that plugs in. Normally I agree with you. Like wireless is usually a pain because then you're shifting for batteries or you have to worry about the charge. This mouse has a 70 hours between charge that it can go. So It can work an entire work week without having to be charged once.
Does it have a docking station you can put it in when you're not using it?
It comes with a USB cable that you can plug in to charge, and it still works wirelessly while you're charging it. So it can just turn into a wired mouse.
Unlike the Apple one that has the charging port on the bottom of it.
Well, it also has a charging port on the bottom and an optional charging dock that you can buy. So at the end of the day, you can just set your mouse on the little charging dock, and then it just stays charged forever. And it's got internal lithium-ion batteries, so you never have to replace them.
Is this the same manufacturer, Razer?
Same manufacturer, same mouse.
All right, Razer, sponsor the podcast.
Yeah, Razer, send us free stuff. It's the Razer Death Adder V2 Pro Wireless. And it is... So it's like $130 retail, which is a lot for a computer mouse. But I've been looking at it for a long time, and so every couple of days I'd go into Amazon, see if it's on sale or whatever. And then one day last week, I was just having a rough day. It's tax season. I'm working a lot. And I went online to check it, and it was on sale for $90. It was $40 off, Ben.
Okay, nice.
And
nice.
It was $40 off, and I was having a bad day, and I just wanted to feel better about myself, so I did it. I pulled the trigger, and I bought a really expensive wireless mouse.
Okay, so I got a question for you before you go any farther.
Okay.
What on earth does this have to do with your wife?
Let me land my plane. So I waited home with bated breath, the way that you do for Amazon to deliver your new thing. And then it finally shows up 2 days later, and I rip open the box and I get it all hooked up and working right. And it's so wonderful. And it's like everything that the other mouse has, but just better. Like the texture is so much better. The materials are so much better. And I picked it up and I held it aloft in a reverent hand. And I pointed it at my wife and I said, honey, come experience this marvelous, wonderful thing that is this mouse. And she goes...
I'm imagining the Legend of Zelda opening a treasure chest sound effect. Da, 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 da.
And she goes, it's a mouse. And then turned her back on me and walked off. And I sat there with my mouth open a little bit. I'm like, well, okay, I guess that makes sense because she's not really a computer person. But then Ben, what did I do? I wanted more validation, so I reached for my phone and I texted my best friend in the whole world. So what did you say when I texted you about how awesome my mouse was?
Did I say you'll shoot your eye out just like Nicole did?
I honestly, I can't remember the exact words, but it came across as like, meh, I don't care. And then you changed the subject.
Wow. Oh, man. I missed my chance.
So
Josh couldn't get validation from his wife he wanted from me, and I failed to give it.
So this is why I wanted to bring it up in the podcast, because you and your spouse, I imagine, have some things where you don't have overlapping interests. There are things that you like that she just doesn't care about. Yes?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, there are things that I very much care about that she doesn't, and vice versa. This is one of those things. Anything to do with the computer stuff, like I get super pumped and really into. Ben, I researched this mouse for hours. I ghosted you. I watched multiple hardware reviews of this mouse with direct comparisons.
That could have not been my fault. You could have been texting me all that during the middle of the day when my phone was locked in my car 300 yards from where I was sitting.
Yeah, I'm trying to explain it now, and you're trying to justify it. Like, just let me talk. Let me gush about my mouse for a minute.
All right.
Anyway, I just poured so much thought and effort and attention into this thing, and it was so gratifying to finally have it and use it, and it was everything that I expected it to be. And I just wanted somebody to like high five, and everybody that walked past me just like left me hanging. That's what it felt like.
So you just described so perfectly the plot of this children's book that we have that was written by one of my college professors. It's called Hip Hip Hooray for Annie McRae.
Okay.
The plot of the book is that Annie McRae gets up one morning and she does all the things. She gets up and gets dressed by herself, and as she's leaving her room, her mom's like, good job getting up and getting dressed by yourself. Hip hip hooray for Annie McRae. And then she goes to the kitchen and she makes herself breakfast and she doesn't spill any milk. And her dad says, Annie, good job making yourself breakfast without spilling any milk. Hip hip hooray for Annie McRae. And she practices the piano and she does her homework, and her teacher praises her and her grandma praises her, and she's just loving life. Then one bad day she gets up and she does all the things and no one praises her. Mom's too busy, dad's not paying attention, grandma's taking a nap, teacher was having a bad day, and she does all the same stuff, but nobody praises her. And she has to learn that really the only person in life that's going to cheer for your accomplishments is you.
I don't know if we can be friends after this. Like, I'm not asking you to...
I'm happy for you and your wonderful new mouse, Josh. I can't wait to try it.
Don't you patronize me, you punk. Now I just feel like Annie McRae looking for gratification. It just drawing that similarity has completely like demoted me to the rank of an 8-year-old kid that didn't get a high five when she wanted it.
I have things where I want to get high fived about, and I don't even care. I'm like JD. I've got my hug checklist in my pocket.
Well, I'm so disillusioned. Like, I don't even know.
You just fully described the plot of that book so well, I couldn't help it.
Anyway, this is one of those things that I got super pumped over, and I just wanted to share my exuberance with somebody. I wasn't looking for praise. I wasn't looking for the attaboy. I just wanted somebody to be like there with me and like, appreciate the thing that I appreciate.
No one in my life can get as excited about shoes as I can, Josh. I have not yet found the person in my life that can get excited about shoes or sumo wrestling. So I just enjoy those things on my own. But when I get a really good magic deck, I text it to you and you get appropriately excited. But if I texted you about like some sumo wrestler winning or about my new pair of shoes, I don't think you could muster it. Maybe you could. I don't know.
Probably not to the degree that you want, though.
Yeah.
So I'm not looking for people to text me or like post in the Reddit or whatever about my mouse and ask me questions about it. I don't care about that. I just want I'm sharing this experience with everybody. Like if you're in a long-term committed relationship, it doesn't even have to be a marriage. It can be us as friends. There's going to be non-overlapping sectors of interest that you're disappointed you can't share with other people.
So here is a thing that happens when you do this kind of thing that maybe you don't realize and maybe you will find gratifying. And that is, if I decided I need a new mouse and I want a really good one, you would be the first person I would think of. Hey, Josh, I'm looking for a new mouse. What advice do you have? And you would tell me things like you just said. well, here's what you can do, but here's what you get for going up to the next premium price point, and here's the pros and cons between these two tiers. And I would rely on you very seriously to give me good advice in that arena. But until I have that problem, I don't care. For instance, you have been evangelizing me for months to try to get a widescreen monitor, which I think you've misinterpreted my response to that. You think I'm apathetic about it. I am not at all apathetic about it. I recognize the fact that I can't justify doing that yet, but when I do, you're the person I'll ask about it.
Yes, if I haven't talked about it on the podcast before, I made the switch to ultra wide, which is I think it's 21:9 aspect ratio. It's like as wide as 1.5 monitors. And I'm never going back. It's so nice. Like I'm looking, my podcast setup has 2 dual monitors, and technically, yes, it's more landscape, but this giant division in the middle just is terrible.
Yeah, I get it. I've gotten by with the bezel for so long. I could see how that would change your life to do away with it. I'll make the switch, just not yet.
All right. Well, let me know when you do. I'm excited for you.
Joe Biden sent me a bunch of money this week. Maybe I'll make a purchase.
There you go.
On our last podcast, I told you the story of myself doing a impromptu marathon, which I know sounds like an oxymoron, but I just went out one day after work and ran 26.2 miles.
Just for fun, because that's what you do after work on a Wednesday. It's like, should I sit down and watch an episode of Frasier, or should I get up and run 26.2 miles?
So that's what I did that afternoon. But for about the next week and a half, my feet were kind of hurting. Like I was able to, get up and walk to work okay, but my feet were hurting. So, but I didn't want to just go to complete inactivity while I was recovering, but I also didn't want to keep running. So I decided to spend a lot more time rollerblading, which doesn't hurt my feet at all because there's no impact and the shoes are rigid. So easy enough. So I did a ton more rollerblading, and a week ago today, I went to a new location that I hadn't tried before, and I was booking, Josh. I must have been going 30 miles an hour on this really nice, wide, smooth path. And I saw ahead of me under a tree where they must have done some utility work, there was a complete section of the sidewalk missing, where they obviously plowed out the concrete and then filled it back in with dirt. And it looked like the dirt was hard packed from people walking and cycling over it. And I have 110 millimeter wheels, which are kind of big, so I can tend to roll over little patches like that. So it was an 8-foot section of sidewalk that was missing, and I thought I could roll over it. And I was going maybe 25, 30 miles an hour.
So I'm going to stop you here. Have you never seen one of those, like if you're going down a mountain on a highway, every few miles they'll have a big set of dirt off to the side for runaway trucks? Have you never seen one of those?
Yeah.
Because the whole idea there is that the truck transitions from sidewalk or from the pavement to the dirt and immediately stops.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I can imagine where this is going.
Or not going. So I hit this section of sidewalk and the world goes into slow motion. Like it is immediately obvious. One, my wheels stopped instantly the second they went off of the sidewalk onto the dirt. Like it went like it was like I went into mud. And two, I wasn't going to be able to recover. I wasn't going to be able to bail gracefully.
So this is stupid, but I actually was taught in a class at the academy how to fall appropriately. So did you tuck your head and angle your hands and then roll with the momentum to dispel it across as much of your body as possible, or did you just face plant?
So I don't know if that applies. I mean, you're talking about, were you parajumping at the academy?
No, it was unarmed combat class, and they taught us how to dive over the hood of a car.
Yeah. Okay, I was going, just imagine the physics of it. I'm going straight forward at 30 miles an hour, and then if you think of, the all 5'9" of me, now the bottom part of me stops moving in a very, in about 4 feet.
Yes.
And the top half of me carries my momentum.
You're sent ass over tea kettle.
Yeah, except I just flew forward like Superman.
Okay.
I was wearing a helmet and I had on padded gloves, but I was wearing shorts and a t-shirt, and I did not have anything on my elbows or knees.
Okay. So listeners, I'm going to try to teach you a life lesson. Whatever you're doing, stop for a second. Take both of your hands and put them together and form a diamond in front of you. Okay? With your elbows out to the side, so you're making like a big circle with your body.
Okay, I'm doing it.
Okay? Now, kick it off at a 45-degree angle. Either way, it doesn't matter. Whichever shoulder is now higher, tuck your head against that shoulder. And then now that is how you roll. The idea is that the diamond that you're forming with your hands is what impacts the ground first, and then you roll with it. And you just keep rolling until all of your energy is dissipated.
Okay, I think I have forensic evidence that I did something similar to that.
Okay. Forensic evidence. He's rolling up his long sleeves, ladies and gentlemen. And
so as you can see on my forearms, I have
multiple abrasions.
Yeah, on my elbows and forearms. So I hit the ground, and then my arms rolled over and tucked up underneath me, and I basically skidded to a stop on my stomach with my arms tucked up tight against my chest.
That's exactly the opposite of what I'm saying. You should have been not sliding, because that's when the cheese grater and the road rash comes in. You need to roll, sir.
Yeah, but if I tumbled, there might have been like impacts on corners and joints. I don't know. I can't argue with whatever research justified them teaching you that in a self-defense class at the academy. But yeah, so...
Yes, you have multiple abrasions on your forearms. All right, so I guess we're going through all this, and I'm assuming that you're fine because you're sitting here talking to me now. But are you okay?
Okay, so I'm not. I'm not okay. I tumbled to a.
Are you in a wheelchair, Ben? Like, I can't see your lower half. Like, are you amputated? He's reaching off camera for something. Oh, he's got a crutch, an actual crutch, not a metaphorical crutch that we're used to. You have an actual crutch.
Yeah, so these are my crutches.
You obviously haven't used crutches very often because you haven't wrapped the top in towels yet.
No, I'm okay. So I tumbled to a stop there at the on the ground, and almost instantaneously, a lady pulls up to the curb and rolls down her window, like that scene from Clueless where Ty falls down the stairs, and the guy runs up and goes, "Are you okay? That was really bad."
So you fell in such a spectacular fashion that it immediately bypassed all social norms and mores, and innocent bystanders were pulling off of the street to make sure that you were still alive.
Yeah, so I did a systems check. Instantly all the pain receptors from the road rash on both of my arms, both of my legs are just firing off. So I'm getting all the just burn pain because it was friction. This is heat burns from just skidding so fast across the ground until I finally came to a stop. My arms and legs were the brake pads of this scenario.
You should have taken a picture of your giant skid mark.
I do have some photos. I can maybe I'll post. I'm thinking it's kind of gruesome. I don't know if I want to post it in the album. If it's there, it's there. So I get up and I try to see if maybe here's what went through my mind. Maybe I can just keep skating. I was going to keep going anyway.
That's adrenaline and shock talking, but okay, keep going.
Yeah. And then I did like one push and my left leg was just giving out. Like it wasn't even accepting inputs. I'm like, okay, I can't do that. And now I'm not even so sure I can get back to my car because I'd only been about a mile from where I started.
Okay.
So I sat down on the grass and the lady pulls up and rolls down her window and she's like, "Are you okay?" I'm like, "No, I'm not okay." She says, "Do you need a ride?" I'm like, "Yeah, can you take me back to my car?" And she said, "Okay." So I kind of drug myself over to her car, took off my rollerblades, climbed in, and she kept glancing over at me as new pools of blood were starting to form in different places. And she's like, "Ew, that's really bad." I'm like, "Yeah." So she drove me back to my car, and I got in my car, and I knew I needed to drive to the hospital, if nothing else, to x-ray my left leg. I am not the kind of person that if I just get some bumps and bruises and scrapes that I'll go to the hospital. But my left leg was worrying me enough that I wanted a doctor's opinion on how well it was.
We completely blew past this part, but I wanted to say that I've always relied on the kindness of strangers. All right, please go ahead.
Yes. Thank you, Lisa. If you're a listener to the podcast, thank you very much. I appreciate the ride. I'm sorry I didn't have a chance to do anything, but just say thank you as I got out and was bleeding all over the place.
You were in her car for 1 mile. I can see that being one of the things you talked about. "Hi, I'm Ben." "Hi, I'm Lisa." "Oh, Lisa, I have a podcast. You should listen to it."
So I had a first aid kit in my trunk, and I kind of tried to get the gravel out, and it wasn't coming out. It really hurt, and I'm like, man, this is gonna be arduous. Now, I have been through this before, maybe 6 times in my life.
What, something wiping out really bad level. On rollerblades or just in personal injuries?
Yeah, I've been hit by a car twice on a bicycle, and I've fallen within this realm on rollerblades at least 2 other times.
Okay. And you haven't learned your lesson yet?
No, I know. You think I'd at least wear knee pads. So, and my left knee hit the ground really hard, and it was bloody from all the way on the top of it to all the way on the bottom of it, just complete all the way around the whole thing. So I got in the car, and as I'm driving to the hospital, I immediately call my wife because I know she's going to want to know about this. And I'm like, honey, I'm on my way to the hospital. And I said, I think I'm okay. And she did a thing. It's a funny thing because she's been married to me long enough. She knows this. I'm like, she's already computed in her head that the fact that I'm going to the hospital means it's worse than I'm telling her.
Okay.
Because she knows I would not go to the hospital unless I knew it was really bad. And she goes, you broke your leg. She didn't say, did you break your leg? She didn't say, what's wrong? She's like, you broke your leg. And I said, it's not broken. I'm sure it's not. But I think I might have like torn my ACL or something like that.
The bones are together, I'm sure, because I can see most of them.
So she does something wise, and she just shifts into like fixing mode, and she says, I said, I can't walk. I can't put any weight on it. I don't even know how I'm going to get in once I get to the hospital. She's like, well, you should have called an ambulance. I'm like, then I'd be stranded at the hospital with no one to come get me and no car. This way, I at least have my car at the hospital.
Listen, logistically, that's too much of a burden. It's not like, oh, I have a magic black slate in my pocket that can summon a ride anywhere on the planet. Like
There's no such thing as hospital Uber. They're not like, all right, we drove you here. We got done patching your wounds. Now we'll give you a ride back to where we picked you up from.
Ben, no, I want to slap you. It's so dumb. Like, take the ambulance to the hospital and take the Uber back to your car. All right, never mind. Go ahead. Alicia, I'm on your side. He should have got an ambulance.
No.
If it's that bad.
No, it wasn't. It was fine.
Listen,
Lisa was right there.
I wouldn't have gotten an ambulance either, Ben.
Yeah, okay. All right. So she says, well, what you need to do is when you get to the hospital, call them and have them come out and get you.
Oh.
And I'm like, oh, that's a good idea.
Oh, I'm in the parking lot. Please come help me.
Yeah, that's exactly what I did. I got to the hospital, I pulled in the parking lot, and they had like 3 of these solar-powered blue beacons with lights on them and push this button if you have an emergency.
Oh, wow. That's nice. Was it?
I was like, okay.
Did you push the emergency button, though? Like, did they come out with like a defibrillating kit and stuff?
I pulled up right next to one. I hit the little red button, and an operator came on and sounded confused. Like, no one ever pushes this button. Like, she didn't know what to do. She's like, hello?
It's like,
I'm like
the red phone on the desk rang.
I'm out here in the parking lot next to this emergency sign, and this is an emergency. She's like, what's wrong? I'm like, I need someone to come get me. She's like, well, how did you get to this button? I'm like, you going to send somebody out or not? She's like, I'll see what I can do. So she hangs up, and a few minutes later, a nurse comes out with a wheelchair.
That is not what you said. You weren't that curt to her on the phone. Were you really? Were you?
I might have been. I can't remember. I can't replay the exact conversation. Were you in such pain that
you stopped being a nice person?
Kinda. I was just like, I need somebody to come get me. Like, what's this button for if not this situation?
But nobody pushes that button.
You're not allowed to push. It's like the emergency stop button on the elevator or the escalator. If you actually push it, you get in trouble for pushing the button. I'm sorry, that doesn't qualify as the situation you're actually supposed to use the button for.
It should just be the Wizard of Oz voice that comes on. Who dares push this button?
Yeah. I pushed the button. Who dares push it? So the nurse comes out in a wheelchair. She puts me in, and she can see I got a problem. Now, here's the interesting part, and the reason I'm even telling this part of the story is she goes into the entryway, and there's a security guard there with one of the little forehead thermometers. And I completely bypassed all of the COVID procedures.
Interesting. You found a loophole.
Yeah, she didn't ask me about it. He didn't ask me about it. And I'd already kind of passed the point in their checklists and processes for screening me for COVID. And no one asked me any questions about it the whole time. I went to the dental clinic in the early months of COVID, and I had to pass through 3 separate screenings. There was one at the door, one at the front desk, and one once I got to the chair. But here at the hospital, there was only one. I bypassed it, and I got 0 COVID screening the entire time I was in the hospital.
You must have been in such bad shape that they just knew that they were going to admit you regardless.
Yeah. So they immediately take me back, and they put me in the room, and...
Were you still wearing all your pads and the rollerblades? Please tell me you were still wearing like the helmet and like the wrist guards.
No, I'd taken off. I'd taken everything off because I tried to do some self-first aid with my first aid kit in my trunk when I got back to my car.
It would have been so 90s if you had just still had all the gear on.
Yeah, it wasn't quite the 90s. So I got to see somebody pretty fast. I mean, having them come pick you up really bypasses a lot of stuff. I skipped over the triage. I skipped over the COVID screening. I skipped over a lot of stuff. That was good advice on Alicia's part. Well done, Alicia. And then they bring in a cart and they fill up a tub with soapy water and 2 rags. And I know that it's going to be the scrub out your wounds thing.
With the sandpaper, just to get all that stuff out.
Yeah. And they did something I didn't expect. And this has been my experience with hospitals. As much as they probably like to think or say that they have a very homogeneous standard of care across all hospitals, there's a big degree of variance between we'll do everything for you, don't do anything yourself, including go to the bathroom, as opposed to if you can handle it yourself, go ahead. And this hospital is more towards that side.
So I will agree with you on this because my wife and I had our first child in the middle of nowhere, Clovis, New Mexico, in a hospital, and our second child in Phoenix, Arizona, a huge metropolitan complex. And the experiences that we had with the same procedure in 2 different places was night and freaking day. So I know
wildly different.
Yes, I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah. So I'm like, well, first of all, I need some pain medication because there's no way I'm going to be able to scrub these wounds out without some pain medication. They're like, all right, well, we need to get a doctor for that. So the doctor finally came in. She's like, yeah, you can have some pain meds. Did you drive yourself here? I'm like, I don't want those kinds of pain meds. Just give me like some ibuprofen or something. She's like, fine, here's 600 milligrams. So I popped the pill and I was waiting for it to set in, and they just left me alone. They brought me a tub of hot soapy water and some rags, and then they just left me alone. So I finally got to the point. I called Alicia, and I finally worked up the courage, and I picked up the rag, and I started scrubbing out the wounds, and it was excruciating, getting all the rocks and gravel out of my arms and knees. But I finally got it clean enough, and they come in, and...
Wait, why did you call Alicia at that point? Did you put her on FaceTime and have her coach you through or give you a pep talk or something? Why was that important to the story?
Yeah, I needed the pep talk. And she'd been there before when I'd had wounds scrubbed out by someone else where they'd done it for me.
Alicia, I have to wash my wounds. Why are you calling me? Because it's going to hurt.
Yeah, that's kind of how it went down. So I'm scrubbing all the rocks and gravel out of my. I do all the easy ones first, my hands and my arms and my right knee, and then I'm looking at my left knee that's just hamburger. I mean, it's through the top layer of skin into like the middle layer of skin where you can see like fat. And
ooh, yeah. I know what you're talking
the
about.
hair follicles are gone. Yeah, and I start doing it, and it's just, it's the worst. But I just bite my tongue and struggle through it. And then once the pain reaches the maximum level, it can't go any higher than that. And I'm like, oh, well, I'll just, and I scrub it a few times and I take it off and the pain doesn't fade for maybe 20 seconds. So there's no reason to like drag it out.
Yeah. Don't let the pain fade. Just like you'll go pain blind to it eventually.
Yeah, exactly. So once I reach a max pain level, I was like, okay, it's not getting any worse and it's not going away between scrubs. So I'll just keep scrubbing until it's all out. And I got most of it out, but there were a few pieces that were really deep in there. So I get all done and I've sat there and I have this tub of bloody water and I'm sweating and the nurses all come back in. I've done their job for them and they're like, all right, let's get your bandage up, get you out of here. They brought in a wheeled x-ray cart, took an x-ray, and there was no broken bones. And so they decided the emergency was over. And they bring in a druggie next to me who's completely high and out of his mind. So they're talking to him, and it's one of the craziest conversations I've ever heard. He's like, well, I just got out of detox, and I started drinking like 6 hours later, and I don't even know all the drugs I took, some diazepam, some morphine, and some oxycodone and something, and I can't remember my name or whatever. I don't know what that guy was talking about. Wow. He was in way more danger than me. I'm over there like,
I fell down and got a boo-boo.
I'm like, no thanks, no, I wouldn't even like any Vicodin. And he's like, I'll take it.
Yeah. Oh, can you get it to him and then I'll just have it?
Yeah. So they send in a student nurse to bind up my wounds, and they didn't even give her all the stuff she needed.
That's one of the tests. You have to identify if you need.
She says to me, I'm so glad you're here because I have a test on this next week and I've never done it before.
Does not instill the level of confidence that you want in your medical professional.
And I'm thinking, I've done this at least a dozen times. Like I could be teaching you.
You, at this point in the experience, you should feel bad for wasting all these people's time. Like, they threw the most inexperienced, newest person they could possibly spare at you, and that person was thankful because they had never done it before. Sir, you should have duct taped yourself back together and driven back to your hotel.
And okay, now imagine a person who's never done this before doing a really bad job, and you're not imagining bad enough.
Oh, all right. Hang on a second. Tangent for a second. So when I was at the academy, I had an ingrown toenail, and I don't know if you've ever had one of those, but they're very painful. It's when the nail starts growing into your toe, like uncontrollably.
And you let it go way too long before you do something about it.
Yeah, and so to fix that, they have to give you 4 shots of numbing agent around the nail of your toe, and I don't like.
Oh, that would have been nice.
Well, but then they have to take a pair of scissors, cut the nail in half, and rip out the part that's grown in with pliers.
Holy crap!
I was at the cadet clinic, and they were letting not an intern, not a medical student, but a senior at the academy biology major.
It was like your roommate.
Yeah, it was like a kid that was 1 year older than me with a major. Like, oh yeah, you got it, it's fine. And it took, like, I've had this procedure done twice, once by a professional medical technician and one by this guy. The technician took 3 minutes, and I was in and out of there. I didn't feel a thing. That kid took 33 minutes, and I had to get the shot 4 times because it kept wearing off. And it felt like he was ripping my toenail out with a pair of pliers. So
he was. That sounds like torture.
Right.
Like actual torture.
I can appreciate where you're coming from, having somebody that's inexperienced doing a medical procedure on you.
So first of all, I kept asking her for supplies, and she's like, I'm like, well, don't you have any nonstick gauze pads? She's like, they didn't have any of that. I'm like, well, do you have some antibiotic ointment? She's like, they were out. I'm like, what the heck kind of hospital is this? Can I get a second opinion?
Do you have a SpongeBob Band-Aid and like a hug? Like, what are we doing here?
She keeps dropping things on the floor and then picking them up and using them. She did the thing where she was like trying to roll the gauze around me, and as soon as she started using it, she wasn't holding it right, so it uncoiled all the way. And then she was wrapping it around me. But you know when you wrap something that's uncoiled all the way around
and
it,
then it starts twisting, and you have to untwist it before you can get it.
Well, not just the twist, but then you also have. You've wrapped it one revolution around it.
She didn't bundle it and then start wrapping. She let it wrap around you twice, one the other way.
Yes. She'd wrap it around twice and then have it all wrapped around myself. And then she would unwrap it twice and then wrap it around twice again and then have it wrapped around. Yeah, it was the worst. And then she got out the tape and she was wearing rubber gloves and it kept getting stuck to itself. And it was the worst. So they did everything except my knee, and I'm like, okay, I still got a piece of gravel in there that I really need to get out. Can you guys bring in like some tweezers or something I can use to get it out? And they all went like complete like sheep before the shearer face. Like, what are you talking about? We can't do that. I'm like, this rock right here, I need to get it out of my knee. Like, they reach for the rag. I'm like, no, we're not scrubbing more with the rag.
We're past that.
Get me a tool that I can use to get this out. And then they start going into like, we're going to need to call in an on-call doctor for this mode. And I'm like, I was like 10 minutes from getting out of there and I'd already been there for 2 hours. And I said, never mind, pretend I didn't say anything, ignore the rock. And they don't want to. They're still in escalation mode. I'm like, no, look at me. Pretend I didn't say anything. I like that rock right where it is. Just leave it there. And finish wrapping me up so I can get out of here.
So you went back to the hotel and did the whole Doctor from Master and Commander where you have the mirror and you're operating on yourself thing?
Yes, that's exactly what I did. But I just saw the next 4 hours of my life flash before my eyes because of one little tiny rock that they were too afraid to take on. So I hit the eject button, and luckily they let me hit it. Sometimes medical professionals will not let you hit the eject button.
So yeah, here's a life hack for people. When you're at a doctor's office, you're still the boss. The doctor can't do anything unless you tell him that he's allowed to. So don't let them bully you. They will come in and be very authoritative, but they don't have the power in that scenario.
Yeah, but if you do it in a way that makes it feel like you're second guessing them, they will hit you with a whole lot of bureaucracy that just wastes your time.
There's nothing stopping you from just getting up and walking out either.
Well, there was for me.
Oh, well, from scooting into the wheelchair and then rolling yourself out.
So they get all done bandaging me up, and they're like, all right, well, we'll see you later. I'm like, can I have a pair of crutches? They're like, oh, okay.
Who are they going to, did you have to give them insurance information at any point?
Yeah, all that happened.
Okay.
Well, yeah, I skipped over that because that was really boring. Anyway, so then I go Monday. I go to work, and the military does their thing where they give me a piece of paper that very unobtrusively but very threateningly at the bottom has a little checkbox that says if I won't get better within a year, they'll discharge me from the military.
So you better get better.
Yeah. But in the meantime allows me to get a nice parking spot. It's funny how that's the same form. You're excused from the PT test. You can park up front. And if you don't get better within a year, we're going to kick you out.
Yeah, you have 1 year to get better, or otherwise we're going to bring the shotgun to you. So did they make you go to sick call and see a military doctor to confirm that, yes, indeed, you are actually hurt?
Yes, all that. And he kind of looked at me. He's like, oh, geez, that's terrible. what were you doing?
Like, why did he ask you a lot of questions about, I don't know, say why a 40-plus-year-old man is rollerblading?
No, he didn't ask anything.
Is this 1998?
Okay.
Did I fall into a time warp? What is going on here?
So it's been a week now. Everything's scabbed over except my left knee. Still really terrible. I can almost walk on it now, but it still hurts an awful lot. So I'm scheduled for an MRI on Tuesday to find out if there's any ligament damage.
Permanent soft tissue damage. It's like,
dude.
This limp? No, I didn't get this in the war. I fell down when I was deployed to Florida and I was rollerblading.
Oh, what a terrible story to have to tell.
Yeah, well, you have to make up a good convincing lie.
So that was bad at rollerblading. I hope before... so I looked this up, and if it's just a sprain of my knee, I could be back on my feet in 2 to 4 weeks. So it's been one. Maybe by the time we record again, I'll be running again. Who knows?
Okay, so I want to propose something to you real quick. You're normally the person that names and creates all of the content in our podcast. But I propose that we have a new segment called Bad at Staying Alive, featuring Ben Rich going to the hospital or having some other kind of medical crisis where he endangers his existence in the universe.
When I edited last podcast, episode 41, you quoted CGP Grey, and you kind of threw it offhandedly, and it took me some digging to find the quote that you'd given. I forget what even the quote was, but I found it in one of his Q&As from 5 years ago. I had to dig through the transcripts in order to find it.
Okay.
And right surrounding it was a little thing he'd given where he talked about the fact... He's very conscious as a principled atheist about the fact that if you die, it's just game over. So not dying is your number one mission.
Right. And you're bad at it.
Yeah. I definitely come at it as a principled believer in God. If I die, that's not the end. It's okay.
I'm just looking at the scoreboard. In the time that we've been recording this podcast, you've been to the hospital multiple times, and I have not. So,
yeah.
Objectively, I'm better at staying alive than you.
Well, I'm bad at rollerblading, but you're bad at growing toenails.
Oh, got me there. What a sick burn.
What did he die of? Well...
Look at this nail. It's growing through the bottom of his foot. I don't know what he was thinking.
All right, well, before we get to our feature, I want to do a quick bad at English, real fast. So people probably know that in the English language, Americans and British pronounce things differently, because we have different ways that we enunciate our vowels and consonants and things like that. But sometimes it's really weird where they'll say the same word but stress a different syllable in the word. We put the emphasis on the wrong syllable. So in this case, the word is advertisement. Do you know the British pronunciation of advertisement?
I can't even imagine a different way of saying the word advertisement. It's so ingrained in, that's just how you say the word.
Yeah, it's advertisement.
Advertisement.
Yes. We say advertisement, and for short, we call it an ad. It's we just use the shortened version is the syllable that we stress. But they don't call it a vert. They call it an ad. But they say it's an advertisement.
It's an advertisement. Okay.
Yes.
So we're stressing the advertisement. I feel like we're stressing the ties. Advertisement.
Advertisement.
Man, you see, this is the problem with the English language. I don't it's the same spelling, but how can you say the words differently? These words. All right. So, okay.
Well, this is talked about in the book, and this is the reason I brought it up. How words are spelled or how they're pronounced are just memes. They are what they are because we agree on them. So in England, they agree that it's advertisement, and in America, we agree that it's advertisement.
Have you ever been in a group of people and said a word that you've only ever read and said it wrong, and then get everybody to look at you funny?
Yes. What's your word? I'll tell you what mine is.
Okay, so I was in a group setting, and I was like, oh, this is a really nice tile mosaic.
Awesome.
I'm like, I was very more. I was an adult man, okay. And when people started laughing at me because I said that word wrong, and I pride myself on being an educated person.
I can imagine the look on your face, like, uh-oh, I said that wrong.
It's mosaic for those of you who have not heard the word said before.
Yeah, mine was. Well, that's going to be a new paradigm.
You really said that?
Yeah, but I had no idea that was how you pronounce that word.
You had to be like 12, though.
It's no, I was an adult male. It's nonsense that we pronounce that word paradigm. What's the G for?
Paradigm. How did you go to be an adult without ever having heard the word paradigm?
They were completely separate in my head. I'd heard people say the word paradigm, and I'd seen the word paradigm in writing, and I'd never connected the two.
Wow. Well, there you go.
Like, you'd heard people say mosaic, right?
I must have. Yeah, right. They must just not have linked in my head.
Yeah.
Huh, interesting. Well,
all right.
I think we can both agree that British people say it wrong. It's advertisement.
Well, I think it relates to the book we're about to talk to. So, if you haven't read the book to our audience, there will be no spoilers because it's not that kind of book. This is a nonfiction book by Richard Brody. It's a pretty short read, and he basically talks about the science of what he calls mimetics. And I'll let you drive on this one since it was your book, Josh.
Oh, interesting. All right, so I first read this book several years ago when I was on a big kick of my brain is weird, and I want to know why it is as weird as it is. And so I read a bunch of things about different cognitive sciences, the different ideas and thoughts and theories on how the brain actually works. Because I wanted to take a good look at the hardware that I'm carrying around in my skull and understand it a little better. Because, Ben, throughout my life, I have made poor decisions. And I have found myself in situations where I ask myself, how did I get here? Every step seemed to make sense, and now I find myself in this terrible place. So I wanted to understand what drove some of that. And this book really grabbed me in a lot of good ways because it takes all of these things that I already kind of fundamentally understand and believe in and kind of weaves them all together in this interesting way that explains a lot of how we think and why we think the way that we do. And then kind of almost secondary or ancillary explains a lot of the structures and culture and civilization that we exist in. And I don't know, it just ticked a lot of boxes, and it really gave me good perspective on understanding the universe and myself.
Yeah, I can see that. Now, it's interesting that this book doesn't feel as old as it is. Like, it was kind of prescient the way that he talked about it because the internet was not widespread at the time that he published it.
Yes, but the things that he talks about really blows up. So, like you said, I'm going to try to drive, and there's no spoilers because it's nonfiction. So if you're going to write a report on the book, this is the perfect podcast to listen to. Mimetics is, the way that I think about it, based on how he explained it, is looking at ideas as if they were biological things, like viruses. And he compares them to viruses multiple times. That the idea can exist as a thing separate from you, and it has its own motivations, kind of. Like, obviously, it's not a sentient, thinking, living thing, but neither is a virus. An actual biological virus has a built-in mechanical impediment to multiply and spread to other hosts. Well, if you think about ideas that same way, you can actually... Having that perspective explains a lot of the reasons that we believe in the things that we believe in. Because if the idea itself didn't have some mechanism or some built-in internals to spread itself and to be memorable and to want to have its hosts spread it to other hosts, it wouldn't exist now because it would have been beaten out by other ideas that did.
Yeah. Yeah, so we kind of have to establish some vocabulary that he uses throughout here. So the word meme that we think of it now is a shortcut for just something funny that you share on the internet. But his usage of it, and probably what led to our modern usage of it, is more of this idea of it being an individual unit, an idea that's the basic building block of culture.
Yes. And a lot of what he starts off like building us up and giving us a basic understanding of some biological sciences, which gives us kind of the foundation to understand how memes spread. His memes, not like the memes with the catchy logos or whatever on the internet. And he starts off with evolution and natural selection as kind of his hitting point, which how does that jive with you, Ben? Like I'm not 100%.
Well, hang on, you're skipping to like chapter 4.
Am I? I don't know. I thought.
Yeah, he first starts talking about the mind, just the existence of the mind. He's like, you as an individual are who you are because you have your genes, your programming, your instincts, your programming, and maybe a soul. And he just is agnostic about that. But when I took my behavioral sciences courses in college, they called it nature versus nurture. You know, you have your genetics that give you a predisposition to like and not like and do and not do certain things. And then you have the things that you've been taught since the moment you were born. And together those things combine to give you your personality and existence.
Right. So you have some biological drives and then you have some learned behaviors on top of it.
Yeah, exactly. So then memes, ideas replicate either directly or indirectly, and then you use those to help you and everyone else around you behave the way that you do. And there's either 3 kinds of memes, and he uses these terms throughout the book. There's a distinction meme, a strategy meme, and an association meme. Distinctions are like how you slice reality. Like things are things because we agree that they are, not like whether you say advertisement or advertisement, or whether or not Wyoming actually exists. It doesn't.
Yeah, I've never been to Wyoming, but this is one of those things where it's kind of meta and hard to wrap your head around. But the idea that like, so the ground and the sky aren't really things; they're distinctions in our mind. When the counter argument is obviously they're totally different. That's the ground and that's the sky. Yes, but you are pointing at things and making distinctions in your brain. Like they aren't separate in reality. You are separating them in your perception of them. Yeah,
exactly. An example I thought of was like a stop sign. You know, it's a distinction meme, and it has a strategy that goes along with it and an association that goes along with it, and all those are memes. When we look at a stop sign, there's a system of behaviors that goes along with it, and we know how to follow those. It's a red octagon with the white border and big white letters about a certain size, and it means you go to this point and you come to a full, complete stop and you look both ways, and all those things that go along with it. To a dog or to a bird, it doesn't mean any of that.
It doesn't mean anything. It's not even a sign. It's just one more thing that's sticking up out of the ground for them to land on.
Yeah, exactly.
That's the distinction meme. And then you're talking about strategy memes. Strategy memes are the things that you pick up. Like I'm going to be really bad at this because I didn't take good notes. But strategy memes are the things that you pick up throughout your life and then you refine internally to yourself, or you pick them up from other people on how to behave or how to continue your existence or just how to get through specific situations.
Yeah, and beliefs about like which causes produce which effects.
Yes. So if you're at a party, like for me, I have a strategy meme on how to avoid conversations at a party. I always, I have strategy memes that I'm just going to stay by the food. I'm going to stand over in the corner. I'm going to have both hands full, and I'm trying not to make eye contact with anybody. That is a strategy meme that I have to avoid conversations in a group gathering.
Okay, and if doing all those things failed and you got caught in an asinine conversation, you would analyze that and figure out where you'd gone wrong and then use that to change your behavior for next time.
Yes, I would refine the mechanisms and the meme in my head that would allow me to avoid conversations in the future.
Okay. And then you would use your podcast to pass that on to other people.
Listen, people, human conversation is overrated anyway. Like, this is not what we're talking about.
And then associations are like your attitudes about things.
Just, yes, how you feel. You see certain things and they get associated to other ideas that you have. This is where a lot of biases come in. This is where a lot of the nurture and the learned behavior comes in. This is when you encounter a new situation or a new scenario. Your brain immediately tries to categorize it into something that's familiar so you know how to act and respond.
Yeah, and it could include good things as well as bad, all the isms.
I'm not even going to touch that one.
Yeah. It came up.
I feel like as the agnostic host, I'm not allowed to comment on the isms.
Yeah, well, you could just look at silly things. He talked about like the memes of the past, about how they can seem silly or outdated. He gave the example of hemlines on skirts going up and down over time. And it was a combination of distinction memes, strategy memes, and association memes. If you see other people doing that and you associate it with success or power, then you do it too. And then people see you doing it, and then it becomes part of the culture.
And this is
whatever.
This is one of the things why it's difficult to talk about this book, because there are so many ideas from disparate just functions or different scientific, I'm looking for a word and I can't find it, categories or disciplines. There it is. Different scientific disciplines that all feed into the same thing. And you have to kind of have a good grasp of each of them to see how they can interrelate and intertwine.
Yeah, there's psychology, there's biology, there's behaviorism, there's technology, all kinds of stuff.
Well, and this is why I immediately want to skip to chapter 4, where he's talking about the evolution and the natural selection, because that's where we start getting into the interesting part of this book. Like, he does a lot of explanation of biological natural selection.
So after he introduces the concept of the meme vocabulary and the mind itself, then he talks about viruses. In the biological world, people, plants, and animals can all get infected with viruses. And what they do, like you said, is that they exist to replicate and spread.
Yes.
But they can also occur in man-made things like computers, and they exhibit the same behavior. They exist to replicate and spread. And in the mind. And he gives a few examples and goes into big detail on it later.
So that's one of the two things that I don't like about this book when he talks about it, because as a computer scientist, he talks about, computer viruses exist to spread. Well, no, not really. Computer viruses are a different thing because they're completely artificial and man-made. Whatever. It's fine. I'll let him get away with it. Computer viruses are misunderstood by the vast majority of people. Anyway, we'll just leave that one by. The only other thing is that as a nonfiction book, he does that trope where everything that he says is written in a way that it is the absolute truth with a capital T. What he is saying is correct, and it shouldn't be questioned because this is clearly the correct course. I get that if you're trying to pitch a nonfiction book, you have to write your opinion as if it is concrete. But just like everything else in the world, take it with a grain of salt. If you don't like it,
I don't know. I thought he was good about being even-handed. Like when he brought up the potential existence of the soul, he didn't say that the soul does exist or doesn't exist. He said, you could think that if you want. I choose not to, but either way, you can't disprove it.
He's very good about that with the religious stuff and very, very bad about it with his political leanings, because there's a few times where it comes through that this guy is not a fan of big government.
Yeah, he does have a bit of a libertarian bent. Okay, so also in this section on viruses, he talks about how there's some other aspects of viruses you don't think about. Like all they really have to do is be good at replicating and spreading, but there's a few things they could do that could hamper that. Like if they kill the host too quickly, then it's a bad virus. So let the host keep living. It helps, but it isn't necessarily the overriding concern of the virus. They just need to copy and spread.
Well, and this is where I want to jump ahead to natural selection, because a virus.
We're there. Go ahead.
So
evolution by natural selection.
So he's we're going to lead in with the viruses. Viruses mechanically they just want to spread and multiply and spread to different hosts. If a virus was super contagious but also killed its host in a very short amount of time, it would tend to die off. It would kill its host before that host could spread to other hosts. So the virus wouldn't have the opportunity to spread amongst the population, which means the virus itself would die out. If a virus was too deadly, it automatically precludes itself from being an effective virus. So you want a good mix of a virus that can contaminate your host, but doesn't make them sick enough that they're immediately quarantined, or doesn't kill them off fast enough that they can't spread to other hosts. That's what a good virus is supposed to do.
There's a quote he used here which I really liked, and he said that exponential growth is the most powerful force in the universe.
Yeah.
And I like that because really that's what they're going for with anything, to 1 and 1 make 2, make 4, make 8,
16, 32,
64, 128, and so on.
Yeah, is that as high as you go?
No. I can go. Okay, that brings up a quick story. So I have a nephew that's a bit of a math savant, and I was talking to him once when he was like 6, and I was doing this, and I was showing off, and I went 256, 512, 1024, 2048, 40, whatever the 4001 is. I got it right at the time.
4006 or something. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. And then I stopped, and he just kind of looked at me with a blank expression, and then he rattled off like the next 6. And I totally got pwned.
Well, that's fine and good, but I can drive a car. And you stick your tongue out at him and walk off.
Yeah, you're better at that. I was just embarrassed.
Well, but the idea is that there are some things that a virus can have, but that make it less likely to multiply and progress and spread through the population. If it's very virulent but too deadly, it'll tend to die out before it can spread wide enough to keep itself going.
Right, which is why COVID spread so much better than Ebola.
Yeah, there you go. It is 2% dead, or whatever the percentage is now. It does kill people, but it doesn't kill people to a degree that's alarming enough to make us radically alter our behavior for a long period of time to wipe it out. This is why,
right. And it takes long, and it's dormant long enough that it can get spread before you know you have it.
And this is the reason the common cold is still around. This is the reason the flu is still around, because they spread, and they're not deadly enough for us to really tackle it. It doesn't matter. So you can apply those same types of ideas to ideas. Those same mechanics exist for an idea. An idea that exists in your head, that it exists. If you're the person that thought of it, you created this idea from the ether, from nothing. If something about this idea doesn't make you want to spread it to other people, then that idea dies with you. So ideas that proliferate and that exist and are widespread in our society are ones that have a built-in mechanism to spread to other people. And he talks a lot about evangelicalism. Like when we're talking about the isms again, most popular religions, most of the biggest religions on the planet have some function to spread to other people. And I'm looking at you, Mr. LDS Ben, who has 2 children that he has supported and sent out into the world for a full calendar year for no other reason.
To evangelize my religion.
To evangelize your memes to other people.
Yeah, and if we want to talk about it in this scientific sense of my religion is a system of memes that exist to replicate, it definitely is true. It is deeply ingrained within the soul of Christianity. You know, Christ himself taught that to take the gospel to all the world. He created this system of beliefs to spread as part of its identity.
Because it's a self-licking ice cream cone, and it goes in a circle. The reason that it is built into the Christianity to spread is because if it wasn't, Christianity wouldn't have spread and it would have died out. How many hundreds of religions existed on the fringes in society in the yesteryear or even today that grow up and then die off immediately in one generation because an aspect of them is not to go out and spread, is not to evangelicalize it?
Well, okay, I'm going to disagree a little bit here, and that's that he brought up the idea of when you talk about a virus or any type of DNA. You know, the 2 best replicators are DNA and memes are way better than DNA, but as long as they have a mind or something to exist in. But he talked about the idea of fitness. He said if something is fit, that means it's good at replicating. But it doesn't necessarily mean it does it the fastest or it survives the longest. It just has whatever set of characteristics it needs that makes it good at replicating. And you were talking about a religion as being good at replicating. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that it has at its soul and heart the most important core concept is that it spreads. For instance, if you were to contrast Christianity and Judaism, which have both persisted for many hundreds of years, Judaism does not evangelize. They're like, if we want more Jews, we'll, make some more the old-fashioned way.
Yeah, we will multiply and there will be more of them.
Right. Whereas Christianity has as one of its core tenets to spread to everyone.
Yes, but I don't know. I don't propose to...
But both of those systems are fit as a way of replicating the memes of those religions.
Right, and this is the point that I was actually going to drive into. Like, we're talking about religions, and he talks about religions quite a bit in the book. But it doesn't matter. It applies to all systems. Any idea that exists in the world today, it exists as an amoral thing. Like the idea itself can be good or bad. It doesn't matter. If it exists and it is successful at spreading amongst people, it will. Let's look at a couple. There's the Black Lives Matter movement, and the what people would think of as the polar opposite would be the Make America Great Again movement. Both of these are memes that exist in the world that some people disagree with and some people evangelicalize. The ideas themselves are as a contained unit, not as what they're trying to push or what the message is, but just the fact that those ideas exist. They have proven themselves to be fit memes. They don't care what the morality is because they both exist in a universe together, and they spread amongst multiple people.
Yeah, and you're right. There is a kind of a difference in the quality of the intellectualism, but it doesn't matter. They both are fit in that they spread.
Yes, and they're both. This demonstrates that memes on it doesn't matter what your political leanings are. It doesn't matter what your beliefs are. What is right and wrong. What is fundamentally right and wrong. None of that matters to the idea core itself, because there will always be hosts willing to spread this idea that you might venomously disagree with, and there's hosts that are willing to spread this idea that you think is the best ever.
Now, he said something interesting in this chapter on evolution I'd never heard of or thought before. He said, basically the entire universe is progressing towards entropy, which is just energy leveling out, everything getting farther apart and becoming less energetic.
How do you not think of the heat death of the universe every other day?
Yeah, I know, but entropy is the force by which things become simpler. Everything is becoming simpler by entropy. Evolution is the force of the universe by which things become more complex, which is a fascinating idea to me. It goes against entropy.
I tell my kids every other day that they are the direct force of entropy in my life, because they are trying to tear my house down brick by brick, and I have to pour energy into this system to get it back up to the level where I want it to be again.
Yeah, so deoxyribonucleic acid exists to make copies of itself. In whichever form it is, a plant, animal, human, it's the most fit DNA is the one which makes the most copies of itself.
So, we've been talking a lot about survival of the fittest and ideas replicating, and I feel like, at least I personally feel like we're doing a terrible job of it. But the whole core concept of this book is that ideas exist separate from the minds that hold them. And that's kind of what I talk about with that CGP Grey quote, where if you want to be right, you have to be willing to change your mind. You can't take these ideas.
That was the quote I had to look up.
Okay, yeah. It's if you internalize this stuff and think that it's yours, you're going to be manipulated, even by your own thoughts and ideas. You have to recognize that all of these things, everything that exists in the universe, is an artificial construct of our own mind. And you have to have that kind of take a step back, try to recognize your biases, look at everything, every thought that you ever have as objectively as possible, and really think, is this something that I agree with? How did this get into my head in the first place?
Yeah, and sometimes it's hard to figure out. And at this point, he introduced a concept in this chapter called a kludge. Everyone's heard the word kludge. I think we use it casually, but he uses it in this book to describe the fact that most things, in a macro sense, are just a combination of lots of little individual things that aren't, like if you go down to the atomic level, there is no color. But for some reason, when you kludge things together in a certain order and shape, then they have colors.
We naturally select people evolved today to be able to see colors because the people prehistorically that could see a wider spectrum of colors were naturally selected to be better. Maybe they were able to identify predators in their camouflage. Maybe they were able to identify food in the wild with colorful fruits. Whatever. For whatever reason, people with wide-ranging color vision were naturally selected and more fit to procreate than those that weren't. So therefore, today, we all have color vision.
Yeah, but apparently the organ of the eye was a kludge of a lot of different systems early on in evolution, and it doesn't make sense. If you were to engineer it from scratch, you wouldn't do it the way that it is, and there's a big blind spot in the back of your retina because the nerves come out the wrong direction.
Yeah, if you've never heard of this before, there's a bunch of stuff you can search on the internet that will show you pictures and demonstrate the different optical illusions that exist that basically take advantage of some of the mechanics of your eyeball to fool you into seeing things that aren't real, which is really cool and very trippy. Yeah. One of my favorite examples of this, this is actually a little bit of a different idea, but that all of these natural selectors that happened that we evolved to have in the prehistoric days that made us more fit to replicate then, a lot of them no longer apply. And we're in this modern society where all of these things that we are evolved to be super hypersensitive towards are no longer really problems. One of my favorite examples is people like things that are sweet. We love sugar. And so this is because back in prehistoric times, things that had sugar gave us more chemical energy to continue our existence. And so the people that liked sugar, that had a predilection to go find things that were high in calories, were the ones that were more fit to survive. And therefore, here we are today wanting all of these calories and sugars and things that taste good.
Right. And now that our ability to produce it has exceeded our, made it so that our taste for it exceeds what we need to subsist, we have different problems.
Technology has evolved to the point where we can find the thing that we like. It's like, it's no longer fruit. It's like, oh, of this fruit, there is this tiny little percentage of stuff that we like, that we taste good. Let's take that out and let's put it into French fries and cheeseburgers and milkshakes and all the fatty, gross things that are causing us massive health problems now. This is a biological carryover that is now a detriment to our current society.
Yeah, and it's also a combination of a lot of different things in the environment. Like, for instance, fitness in the animal kingdom doesn't always lead to the same place. It doesn't lead to you becoming an alpha predator. You just need to fill a niche and you could be fit to replicate and copy yourself. You know, some animals are very docile, like a capybara or a sloth. You know, they're not dangerous, they're not fast, they're not ferocious, but they still succeed in being fit for replicating. Some animals, I would say, have become the best at copying and replicating because they are domesticatable and delicious.
Cows and chickens. Cows can't exist in
They're
the
two
wild.
of the most prolific species on Earth because their trait that they developed was being domesticatable and delicious to humans.
I actually look forward to a future where we can have lab-grown meat and we don't have to slaughter. We don't have to have a cow genocide every other month just so I can have my steak. That's neither here nor there. One interesting thing to remember is that the same way that our prehistoric biological predilections are hampering us now, the same thing happens with ideas. So a lot of us have this ingrained, like, root level fear of the other. Like, growing up, we are able to identify people that are not like us, and we have a built-in fear of things that don't look like us. Like, every monster movie you've ever seen as a kid growing up, all they have to do is take a human shape and tweak it just a little bit. Make the arms just a little too long, the eyes just a little too big, and you are immediately afraid and or suspicious of it. And that idea and that built-in biological predilection is causing us problems now when we're talking about trying and striving for a diverse and understanding and accepting culture.
So to kind of wrap up the section on DNA, he talks about the idea that basically a lot of the information in DNA is unnecessary, or it seems that way to us. It's just a kludge. It's just a whole bunch of proteins in a chain together. You can't just look at a chain of DNA and go, oh, here's the part that gives the map for how to build a finger. It's just all in there. All it does is copy itself. But it has to have two properties. It has to have a certain amount of fidelity that when it copies itself, it retains enough of its identity that it's reliable. But it also has to be enough unreliable that it will evolve into beneficial characteristics.
Every once in a while, there's going to be a problem with the copying, an error. Some bits will get flipped somewhere, and then you'll have a minor change. And that's where the natural selection, the evolution comes in, is this thing has multiple offspring. Some of them are a little different in minor ways. Those differences might add up to nothing, or they might make them more fit to survive, and therefore those genes are more likely to be propagated down the line.
So I think I may have mentioned this on the cast before. Stop me if I have, but my family has one of those. It's called cystic fibrosis.
You've mentioned the cystic fibrosis before, but not in any kind of depth.
Okay, so cystic fibrosis is a recessive genetic disorder that affects your chlorine transfer proteins in your cellular membranes, which when you have two of them in your genome, you exhibit the symptoms of it, and it causes a ton of problems. Males are sterile, you have problems with digestion, respiratory, salt retention, a whole bunch of bad things. However, if you only have one of them, you don't exhibit any of those symptoms, except you're slightly defective at transporting chlorine, and it makes you resistant to dysentery. So if you had a population of humans and a few of them carried cystic fibrosis and the whole population contracted dysentery, the ones that carry cystic fibrosis would be more likely to survive.
So if you're living in a population pre-sanitation, pre-public sewers, or whatever, that has the possibility of contracting mass dysentery, that situation would be inclined to select people that had the recessive cystic fibrosis gene that were resistant to the dysentery.
Yes. The problem, the thing that little vignette teaches me is that if we think that we somehow understand the human genome and we could say, for instance, test tube engineer the perfect human, we of course would not engineer them to be a carrier of cystic fibrosis. But we could potentially do like we've done with bananas and create a single homogeneous gene, and that's like being threatened by a single mold that will kill out the entire population of banana trees because they've all been engineered from one particular organism.
Do you really want to go down the rabbit hole of genetic engineering? Because, buddy, I'm willing to swim to the bottom of that hole with you and just...
Let's go to the next chapter where we switch from talking about all those ideas in the realm of DNA and now talk about it with ideas and memes.
And so the idea is that the same scenarios and the same rules and the same mechanisms exist in the realm of ideas and thoughts. Is that an idea or a thought process or an ism or a culture or a government, all of these things exist, and they will only continue to exist if they are the most fit amongst their competitors.
And like DNA, they have to, one, be able to copy with a certain degree of fidelity, but also they have to be able to change a little bit, which allows them to innovate and evolve.
Not only it's not necessarily a discussion of can they change, but they will be changed. Because they discuss, like, everybody's played that game as a kid, the telephone game, where you all sit in a big circle and one person whispers a couple sentences into somebody's ear, and it just travels around the circle. And even though the whole point is to try to remember and replicate the idea exactly to each person, it gets ridiculously contorted in its traveling around. And that's the evolution. That's where the evolution kicks in, is this idea as it travels through people will be tweaked because of your bias, because of your worldview. Like, little changes will occur in every idea that passes through your head, and you will pass on a slightly different version. And everybody is doing this all the time on the internet, which means the most distilled and the most selective, like the most fit version of it, comes out on top.
Yeah, I mean, humans have a mind which allows us to have consciousness and think complex thoughts, and that gave us an advantage from the strict DNA point of view of just copying and replicating our DNA. But then that gave us other advantages, which led us to do things like, I don't know, develop eyeglasses to overcome defects in our eyes from not being able to see, when normally that would just lead to us being, I don't know, eaten by predators or something like that.
Oh, I'd have been run over. Like, if I had been born in even like medieval times, I'd have been run over by like a horse or a cart or something, like forever ago. I'd have been dead long ago.
Are you familiar with the conceit of the movie Idiocracy?
I do like the movie Idiocracy, where we're naturally selecting for stupidity.
Yeah. Basically, stupid people have more babies than smart people. Yeah. And so at some point, that's just going to overrun, and the general IQ of the population will deteriorate to a point where we're just completely dumb as human beings.
I don't think that's true. I think we'll wipe ourselves out long before it gets to that point.
Yeah. They just took a ridiculous concept all the way out and made a movie about it.
It's a funny movie, and I recommend it.
I chose not to see it.
You see, you're selectively bias against a movie. You have to be open to new ideas, Ben. You have to. All right, so this is something that we're talking about this book, and we're doing a bad job, I think, of explaining what this whole thing means. But what I got out of this is you have to be willing to take in and analyze all ideas, because now more than ever, I feel like we live in an echo chamber. Like, we're talking offline, I think you and I were talking about, like, what are the YouTube videos that we see on our phone? Like, the world is getting better and better at catering to our individual desires without us even realizing it. Netflix offers up shows that it thinks we'll like. Google is showing us advertisements and videos on YouTube that are similar to other videos that we've watched. And so we're living in a society where we are less and less exposed to altering and different viewpoints. And when we are exposed to these different viewpoints, it's usually this most distilled, perfect meme version of it that, of course, isn't representative of the entire population or of what the believers in that idea really think, but it might be the most polarizing or the most grotesque or just the most, like, totemic version of that idea.
So do you think understanding all of this gives you control over it? Like, can you resist something because you understand that it's following these rules?
I think it's just one more tool. For me, the way I see it, it's just one more thing that informs my decisions about the thoughts that I have and the information that I take in. Like, re-listening to this book made me realize that it has been a very, very long time since I sat down with an educated Republican person and have them really explain, okay, what are the tenets of the Republican Party that you believe in so firmly that you would support it? Because all I see on the news are the most idiotic versions of it, are the most polarized, and all I see are the people that are invading the Capitol, waving around the Confederate flag. I'm like, how can anybody in their right mind believe the things that these idiots believe? And the answer is they don't. There are a lot of very educated, smart people that believe in the Republican side of things that don't believe in the people that invaded the Capitol. But it has been so long since I've heard an intelligent conversation from one of those people, because like my phone is only giving me videos that are progressive or left-leaning, and my TV shows are all the ones that I pick. I don't just watch whatever's on TV or whatever the news channel is. I get to select what I watch, and I'm going to select the things that I already agree with.
Yeah. So he talked about how biologically we're very predisposed to things that relate to the 4 Fs. Flying, fighting, feeding, and...
fornicating.
Finding a mate.
Fornicate, multiplication. You know what's really funny is I was trying to explain this I was having a conversation with my wife, and my son was overhearing it. And we're talking about, the 4 Fs. And she goes, yeah, of course. And my son goes, what are the 4 Fs? And we both kind of stopped for a second. Oh, it's fight, flee, food, and finding a mommy and daddy together to make babies. And he goes, oh, friends. Yes, friends. The 4th F is friends.
Yeah, so that means our brains are very attuned and keyed in on things that relate to danger, food, or sex. It's we're hardwired for it. So memes that can tap into that are more likely to replicate and evolve.
Right, which then means we get hyper violent or hyper aggressive versions of ideas, or we get One of my favorite commercials of all time is an Carl's Jr. commercial that had some very attractive young lady in like a bikini top and Daisy Duke cutoff jean shorts laying on the hood of a jacked up pickup truck eating this giant sloppy sandwich with a barbecue sauce and stuff dripping out the sides. And I don't think a single word was ever said in that commercial. It was
I think that nails all of the 4 Fs there.
And it was fantastic. I love watching that commertal. Just some hot woman eating a ginormous cheeseburger, and it just says Carl's Jr.
They just unabashedly are tapping into all of our hardwired brain functions just with unapologetically.
Yes. And this is something...
it got a lot of attention for that reason.
This is a recurring theme in the book, is that advertisers have known these things for a very long time, whether consciously or subconsciously, because advertising is competitive, profitable meme generation and spreading. And so they're trial and error brute forcing the things that resonate with the people that are looking at them. And so whether they realized it or not, it is like the gladiatorial combat pit of memes.
Yeah, well, and we've developed higher functions that go beyond just the 4 Fs. We develop a sense of belonging or distinguishing, caring, seeking approval, obeying authority. All those kinds of things are also higher functions that feed into memes that we replicate.
But this is the thing, is those higher functions are exactly that. They are artificial constructs within our brain. We value belonging, and we value dedication and loyalty and hard work, not because our hardwired primitive monkey brains think those things are good, but because society and the lessons that we learned growing up all reinforced those ideas. The 4 Fs skip all of that. They skip all of the programming that we have in our brain, and they go straight to the animal part. And that's why they're so effective.
Yeah, but if that's all there was to it, they would only be one kind, but there's more to it than that.
Well, yeah.
It's funny when you think of I don't know if you have the Reddit app installed on your phone, but I'll scroll through it, and every now and then an ad will come up, and it usually sticks out like a sore thumb because some advertisers tried to create something that looks like the kind of meme that people replicate, but isn't quite. Like you said, there's the uncanny valley there.
Yeah. I know what you're saying.
every now and then they'll get really close and fool me. And I'll be like, oh wait, that's an ad. And I, unlike it.
There was a video that I showed a bunch of people before I found out it was a Gatorade ad. And it was at a baseball game, and they had the announcers going, and everything looked exactly like a clip from a telecast of a baseball game. And there was a foul ball, and like the outfielder gave up on it, but then the ball girl that was sitting...
I've seen that one.
Where she runs up and she does the double jump off of 2 walls and catches it like 10 feet in the air and then falls down.
Yeah, and then just goes back to her ball girl chair.
That's a Gatorade ad. And she's drinking a Gatorade
completely
at the end
staged, completely fake.
Yeah, totally fake, completely staged. But it's clever because it doesn't at any time indicate that it isn't a paid advertisement.
All right. So then he devotes a chapter to each of the 3 main things, food, danger, and sex. So sex is the root of all evolution. And he talks about the difference between males and females, what they have in common, what they have different, how that's led to a lot of memes, sexual mores, generational shifts, all that kind of stuff. I don't know how much you want to go into all that.
I just want to talk about the one idea that I think is fascinating, is that monogamy is an idea developed by beta males in order to try to get more action. Like,
he didn't really say
that.
He
totally said that. Like, if we were still back in the animal kingdom, we would just be packs of lions where you have one alpha male and then all the females and a bunch of beta males that are just whining and complaining why they aren't the alpha male, and they're waiting for him to get old and die off so they can take his place. Instead, so men have very little biological investment in offspring. In that,
definitely talked about that.
Women have a very high biological investment in offspring because it takes a lot to create a baby from nothing.
Right.
Men are barely involved. And so in an effort to become more attractive, beta males have tapped into the women and said, hey,
you're inserting the term alpha and beta. He didn't use those at any point in the book.
Okay. Well,
he never said alpha or beta.
I'm pretty sure he did. But I'll agree to disagree on this one. I will insert them because it makes my point clearer. It's like, hey, listen, lady, I know I'm a beta male, but you know what that alpha male's not going to do? He's not going to stick around. You're going to be pregnant and dealing with this kid for years, and he's just going to go off with some other lady. I'm going to stick around and be here for you and that kid. I'm going to be just.
And so maybe you're not as strong as him, and maybe you're not as powerful or attractive as him, but you'll be loyal, and both are good strategies for your DNA to replicate.
Right. Every sexual moray that we have, every rule that we have created in society, from the 10 Commandments to misdemeanors on the street, are all memes that somehow reinforce something that helps society or people in general propagate through time. So again, all of these things exist in an amoral environment, and they just progress. Like if you had a society that said, hey, if somebody hits you, you're allowed to kill them. Guess what? That entire civilization would come to a screeching halt after a couple of generations. But the society that says, hey, killing is wrong and you should never do it, that's the society that gets to have kids and propagate throughout history.
Yeah, well, and it's time for my favorite quote, which is Andy Grove once said, every generation thinks they invented sex.
You always say that. You insert that.
I love that quote.
I'm still on this point, Ben. Our generation, the generation that we are in now, because of the internet, may not have invented sex, but boy howdy, we have sure reinvented it in a wonderful way.
We like to think that we did.
Oh, man, you drive me nuts with this.
Under the sun, there's nothing new. Poem or pun, under the sun, there's nothing new.
I don't know, man. There are some things that just, frankly, were not scientifically possible in the realm of sex a couple hundred years ago.
All right, time to move on. So a lot of memes tap into our desire for survival and fear. He talks about, like our desire to watch like horror movies or do really key in when there's something that sounds like it relates to our safety, like weather reports or alarming journalism, like people rushing on stores to buy food when they hear there might be a shortage.
So I'm going to do a thing that I don't normally do, and I'm going to completely shut you down at this point. We're getting late in the podcast. I think people have gotten the gist of the book. If you are interested in the kinds of ideas we're talking about, listen to the book. He does a much better job of explaining them. I want to have a more meta conversation with you about it now.
Okay.
What did you take away from this, Ben? What do you think, were there lessons that you learned from this? Do you think you will alter your behavior or the way that you operate in the world because of the lessons that he is trying to impart to us?
So, we talked about, for our critical thinking card today, we did the backfire effect. Like when your core beliefs are challenged, it can cause you to believe even more strongly. And I was looking at this, like, does the existence of all these things, does this preclude my belief in God and my religious belief and understanding in the way I look at the world because of that? Or am I doubling down on my religious beliefs because this is convincing?
Do you remember when we were first friends? Like when we had just met each other and we're starting to hang out, and we had this I feel like we're both very dedicated to our own belief systems. And we had a very strong back and forth multiple times about, why do you believe what you believe? And we were both coming at the other person like multiple times. Do you remember those?
No, I can't remember a single specific thing about that conversation other than I have the vague recollection that we've discussed this in the past and kind of come to an understanding.
I remember multiple conversations that we had about these specific topics because the good LDS member that you are, and you care about me as a person, you evangelicalized to me very, very firmly a bunch of times. And I would always come back and challenge you with, like, why do you believe what you believe? And like, what's like, there is no fundamental truth behind this, or whatever my argument was at the time. Like you said, we've since kind of settled in. You do you, I'll do me. We both know what the other person believes, and we're okay with it.
Yeah.
But
it's interesting that you'd read this book before we had that discussion, and this is probably part of your processing as we were discussing it, and now I've read it as well.
Part of it is. And honestly, one of the conversations that I will remember forever is that I challenged you with the idea of fruit of the poisonous tree, which is a legal term where if you obtained evidence illegally, then that evidence can't, even if the evidence points to somebody's wrongdoing, you can't use it in a court of law, kind of thing.
Yeah.
It's like the source of the material affects whether or not it's valid.
Yeah, I've always had a problem with that defense. Like, this is really good evidence, but it was obtained illegally, so you can't use it.
Right. And we were discussing that in a religious connotation. And I remember you said to me in this conversation that, I don't know, I feel like you leveled with me. And it's like, maybe not everything I believe in makes sense. And maybe you can't draw a logical conclusion from point A to point B. But I appreciate the lessons that it teaches. I like the community. Everything about this has made my life better. And so I choose to continue to believe the things that I believe. And honestly, from that point forward, I have never questioned your faith. Like, your faith is yours, and if that's what you get out of it, great. And I shouldn't be questioning it in the first place.
Was I exhibiting the backfire effect?
Slightly, a couple of times, when we actually had big, in-depth philosophical, evangelical arguments. Back when I was a younger man and a militant atheist. I'm a lot less militant about it these days.
I mean, you can take these ideas to, like, this logical conclusion, like the movie Idiocracy or something like that. Like, what if the human species devolved into just a bunch of idiots? Or, a couple of stories we talk about a lot on this podcast. 1984, you brought up last episode, or Wall-E. In 1984, you have, like, this malevolent government that's trying to force everyone to act the same way and behave the same way, and they're doing it by controlling the way they think and their vocabulary. They're controlling all the memes.
Yes.
And in Wall-E, it's much less obtrusive, but it's also leading to kind of a dystopian future, but more like, we'll just give you whatever you want and homogenize everything and facilitate the ease of life until it leads to this place where you're just a bunch of worthless fat people floating around on floating chairs.
Yes. And honestly, this book, like you said, it was written before the internet really had its heyday, but it kind of worries me re-listening to these lessons because just like things I was saying before, we are less and less exposed to different ideas, which means we're going to be more ingrained and more militant and just more, I don't know. We immerse ourselves in these echo chambers and we never expand on our thoughts. Like, whatever we're fed, that's what we're just going to take. And we're not even realizing that it's happening. Like, I can't remember the last time that a conservative news segment came up on my YouTube feed or came up in my news feed or came up on any Reddit feed that I've ever had. So
does the fact that you know that cause you to deliberately seek it out?
This is the thing, Ben. Me, personally, yes. I want to know an objective version of what the other side thinks. But I feel like I'm probably in the minority. Like, not everybody is out there cognizant or aware that this is happening to them, that they are being put into this box by the systems that exist around them.
I know this is going to sound overly reductive, but I found a good place for answering the thing you're asking for, at least from a political point of view. The actor that plays Captain America, Chris Evans, was kind of painfully aware of the lack of a good, even-handed, neutral debate ground for political concepts. So he created it. It's called A Starting Point. I think it's asp.com or something. I'll put a link in the show notes. But I subscribe to it, and I go there frequently, and it's excellent. It's basically, though, it's just, all right, a new issue came up, like the border fence. And he'll go out and he'll get opinions from people, not him personally, but he's created this thing. And they'll have politicians, and it's structured like a debate where you have a point and a counterpoint and a rebuttal and a rebuttal of the rebuttal. And you just get an even-handed approach on both sides of the debate. Why do these people think this? Why do these people think that? It's called A Starting Point. Excellent resource. Highly recommended.
That is something that I am genuinely interested in, and I will go watch after this. But that is not something that was fed to me by the systems in the world that exist now. Because advertisers and all of these companies that exist to make money, they recognize that my attention is important. This is another concept that I've seen on the internet, is the idea.
Because your mind can replicate memes.
Yeah, it's the attention economy. It's not about how much money, it's not about time, it's about my attention. I have a million things demanding my attention all the time, from the computer to work to family to my phone, everything. And the more attention that these things, YouTube, Reddit, whatever, can grab from me, the better. The more that they can feed me advertisements. And they realize that if they feed me things that I already agree with, I am more likely to spend attention and time on them.
I thought they depicted this really well in a benign way in Wreck-It Ralph 2. Ralph Breaks the Internet.
That movie was terrible.
I know you hate that movie, but they obviously were thinking about this idea when they made it, where they have all these little avatars floating around the internet that represent the attention of some person in the real world. And they're very fickle.
Very fickle, yes. They just float from one thing to the next.
Yeah, and as long as something's maintaining their attention, they're there and they'll upvote it. But as soon as something happens, they get distracted, gone.
I'm just worried for the future, because from what I've seen, and I've asked my parents and older generations, like, was it always this bad? And I just didn't recognize it. And they said, no, this is the worst that it's ever been. I think the communication systems that we have and the memes and the way that the memes replicate in our current society are causing us to be more polarized without us even realizing it. They're causing us to be more militant and more dedicated to our beliefs than ever before, and we're not consciously aware of it. That's the biggest thing that's scary to me. We're not consciously choosing to believe in these things so firmly or to demonize the other side as much as we do. It's just being inculcated and indoctrinated into us.
Malcolm Gladwell wrote a book called The Tipping Point. And it's interesting because he explores a lot of these same ideas, but from a really different perspective. The tipping point refers to the idea that there will be something and then it will tip and go viral. It could be, he gives the example of like Ugg boots. You know, they used to just be this weird thing that a few ugly people wear, and then some celebrity got seen in them, and the picture ended up on the front page of the paper, and then everyone wants them, and they're the newest, hottest fashion trend. I'm like, what is the process by which something goes from obscurity to going viral? And he talks about all these ideas surrounding it, like what are the mechanisms necessary for something to go from not being a thing to being a really big thing. And he also talks about what's happening in our mind. And our minds resist us understanding what's happening in there. Like, it's hard for us to think about what our mind is doing. And so you asked me what I'm doing with these ideas. And I think, what does the fact that I understand how all this works and that someone's doing this deliberately to try to manipulate me, does me knowing that help me resist it? Yeah, a little. But even sometimes when it's something I know I'm trying to work on, like anger management. You know that you get too angry in certain situations. You know what kind of situations they are. You know what you try to do to control it. But then you get in that situation and you can't stop yourself.
Yeah, I mean, I agree to a point. But at the same time, I, as a younger man, had a huge problem with anger management. And since then, having through concerted effort and understanding of myself and deliberate decision making, I can't stop myself from getting angry, but I'm much better at recognizing when I am no longer being logical, when I'm allowing my anger to speak for me, and then I shut myself down in that, yes, I still feel angry, and yes, I still might disagree with whatever I'm talking to about it, but recognizing that I'm angry in the moment allows me to step back and say, hey, I'm becoming emotional about this, and I'm not making any more sense, so either we need to change the subject, or I just need to think about this more objectively.
That was refreshingly and uncharacteristically optimistic of you, Josh.
Was it?
Yeah.
Well, these are the things that I'm trying to do, so I'm not such a huge jerk.
I just said something a bit fatalistic, and you're like, no, I think understanding this stuff can help me become a better man. And you know what? You're right, Josh. Gosh darn it, you're right.
Oh, man, we have really switched roles in this one. Anyway, but so this is just, like I said, one more tool in the toolbox for recognizing how the world works. Like, not just the ideas and the communication and yourself and your thoughts, but how the systems that we have constructed around us are wanting to get into our brains and change the way we think. You're talking about Malcolm Gladwell, and like a human person like who is very well educated and very smart in the subject matter, having a difficult time trying to quantify the processes that are going on in our mind to cause these things to happen. Guess what, Ben? We have created artificial intelligence algorithms that we have no idea how they work that are way better at making videos go viral than any human person could ever be.
Yeah, that's scary. Wall-E world seems a lot more likely than 1984 at this point.
It could go either way. It depends on who's got their finger on the trigger of all these AIs that are feeding information to people.
But that's the thing. Wall-E is the result of some algorithm we don't understand. 1984 is some malevolent, dictator.
You think that a nation state doesn't have the capacity to leverage these same kinds of technologies against its own population?
Not if we don't understand them.
No. You're missing the point. China has enough information control within its own country and has enough technological understanding at the state level to feed enough.
Do they? Or is that just what they want us to think, and they're barely holding on by a thread?
That might be what our government wants us to think. We don't know the truth. The fact is, it could happen. Like a nation state with enough effort and resources, with the predilection to do so, could.
You just baked my noodle with that last one, Josh. Like, what do we know about anything? I don't even.
That's the thing, Ben. And whenever you have a thought in your head, you have to make the deliberate decision. Is this something that I believe in? And is this something I should believe in? So we started this conversation, and I started this episode saying that it was going to contain the answer. And what's funny is the answer is it kind of depends. So the idea here is understanding how your brain works and understanding how external factors can manipulate you with or without your understanding of them is important if you want to be informed and if you want to really have control over what it is that you think and believe. I personally very much recommend this book, Virus of the Mind. It's like 4 hours to listen to on audiobook. It's worth the time, I think.
What, do you listen to at 1.5 speed? It was like 6.
Oh, was it? Oh, I did listen to it at 1.25 speed, yes. So it's a relatively short listen. If you're willing to listen to it, go faster. But I do recommend it.
Yeah, I won't. I'll give it a modest endorsement. It's an interesting way to think about the world around us and the way ideas propagate.
You always have to bring in new information if you want to be informed, Ben.
Yeah. No. Thanks for the invitation to read Virus of the Mind by Richard Brody.
All right, well, that I think sounds like we're going to finish up, so I'm going to do my part first. That is, if you love what we do, if you like hearing our voices and you think that we're genuinely entertaining, recommend us to a friend. If you love us to death and just never want us to go away, consider becoming a patron on our Patreon. That's just going to keep us going forever.
Yep, and if you like the ideas and you want to get engaged in the discussion and you feel like you're hanging out with a couple of old friends, We're waiting for you out on social media. Come like our Facebook page, and you can see the photo albums I put up every time. You can go to our website and look at the notes and all the links to all the stuff we talked about. You can go on Reddit, and if you want to be anonymous and join in on the discussion there, there's we always get 1 or 2 topics pop up after the episodes now where people make contributions and share things. And you can join in and be part of the discussion. Thanks for being part of the Bad at Magic community.